With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 6 o'clock on Wednesday, the 28th of December. This is Breakfast on GB News with Ellie Costello and Martin Daubney. Here's what's leading the news this morning.
Members of the armed forces will be on site at airports and the port of Newhaven today to cover for Border Force staff as they stage yet another day of industrial action. Holiday makers once again face the prospect of long queues and cancelled flights.
An elected mayor is on the cards for the North East as the government announces a £1.4 billion devolution deal for the region.
And in the year we lost Her Majesty the Queen, our royal correspondent reflects on the events of the 8th of September 2022 and a nation in mourning.
And do get in touch the usual way, you know by now. It's GB News on Twitter or email gbviews@gbnews.uk and let us know where you're watching or listening to us from today. What are you up to on the 28th of December? Are you in your selection boxes? Are you tidying up from Christmas Day? What else could they be up to?
I think everyone's dressing those blankets that you wear. I think everyone seemed to get one this year.
Apart from me. And I did want one. I would.
I think they're really good. They're a great idea.
Have you got one?
Yeah, because they're good for tight wads, for saving money. Mine's so big, I look like a flying squirrel. It's huge and grey.
That's an image for you early in the morning. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Get in touch with us this morning. But away from all the festive fun, industrial action by Border Force staff will resume today and it's expected to heavily impact dozens of airports around the country, along with the port of Newhaven.
Yeah, this welcome news could mean lengthy queues, delays at the border and possibly even cancelled flights for winter holiday makers.
Yes, it comes as a wave of strikes rattled numerous public service roles this month. Through contingency plans, including the deployment of service personnel, it did help and proved to be effective during the first round of strikes before Christmas.
So with us this morning is Hoddy Whitbread, the Conservative councillor for Epping and Thaden, Essex, a regular contributor. OK, so more strikes at the borders. Will anybody notice? Because let's face it, the Army have been magnificent, haven't they?
The Army have done a really great job stepping up. I mean, they shouldn't have to be doing it, and it's really disappointing to see this, but they have done a good job so far of keeping things moving.
I think the worry for many people on social media was the speed of which people were getting through the airports, which many people were saying was fantastic. But there are also questions raised about, you know, were the thorough checks being made at the border? Do we know how much training these soldiers have had before they've had to step up and step in for for Border Force?
I think the Home Office have disputed that there's been any kind of... the process hasn't been followed. So I think that the process has been followed. I think those on strike, there are a number of actual trained Border Force staff there on hand. But we have seen great efficiency, which is good.
Yeah, there have been rumours that they're not allowed to detain or they're not allowed to search suspected terrorists. But then Mike Peake, the British astronaut, went through an airport and he was tweeting that he thought it's all been running very, very well. And it certainly looks like they've stepped up and done a fantastic job. So it begs the question, I think, should we be getting more members of the armed services to do this anyway?
Well, I think the armed forces would argue that they've got other priorities and other things to do. And, you know, there are people who get paid to do this job. But we have seen a great efficiency here, and maybe Border Force could learn something from the Army.
Well, they've certainly been the best of British from where I've been looking at it, Ellie. They've done a fantastic job.
Do you think that we will see conversations in January, Holly, between Border Force unionists and the government? I mean, it must be something they're very, very keen to sort out.
I think the government have said they're open to conversations, but where they're not open, what they're not open to is increasing pay. I think we've got to be realistic about the cost of these mass public sector increases with spiralling inflation, which ultimately is the government's priority to tackle.
I mean, Rishi Sunak has said previously that nurse striking and asking for 19% is completely unaffordable. The PCS, which is the union that's representing Border Force officials, they're asking for 10%, so just below the rate of inflation. Do you think that's something that he might be more willing to offer on?
I mean, I just don't think these huge increases are affordable at this time. And what we need to remember is it's the taxpayer who will be paying the bill. I think the government said around £1,000 per household, which at the time of cost of living crisis and obviously inflation already affecting people's pay packets, it's just not reasonable.
OK, Holly, another story that's in the rounds this morning. It gets political geeks like me very excited. This notion of a £1.4 billion devolution deal for the North East to give them their own directly elected mayor. How might that work?
So this is one of many devolution deals we've seen during this kind of Conservative premiership. So basically it means giving more authority and power and more money to local authorities. Personally, I think it's a really good thing. You have an elected mayor, which means more accountability, better connection with government as well, and also a champion for that local area.
And the money will be spent on skills, transport and housing. So on the face of it, more power, more money, more local control. But doesn't that just mean more bureaucracy? More middle management, more town hall, clipboard wielding kind of busybodies getting in the way?
I think the theory is it takes some of that away. At the moment, some of what local government do, as I experience, is not blocked by government, but made more difficult by the relationship with government. And actually, something that I particularly comment on locally is that we have, where I'm from in Essex, we have 3 layers of local government. So towns and parishes, districts and boroughs, and also county. So actually a simplification of local government is only good for the electorate as well.
What would the people of the North East of England think of this? I know that Andy Burnham is very popular in Manchester. We've seen this before. Do they like the idea of localised power, do you think?
I think most people, they say, you know, when they talk about local government, they just see the council or the mayor. So actually, I think if you can simplify it and have a greater chain of accountability, it's good for local people. And actually, in terms of democracy, you know, they know who they're voting for when it comes to elections.
It's interesting politically because the Labour Party aren't especially happy about this mayor, or they normally are, because normally a mayor means a Labour politician, because mayors tend to be metropolitan areas where their vote is, but this region's different, isn't it? So Michael Gove is the Levelling Up Secretary, is really backing this. So Labour in Newcastle are complaining, for example, well, we can't have somebody in Durham controlling us. So that there is still some political infighting, but on the whole, this is more democratic access for the voters, so it's a good thing, right?
I believe so, yeah. And obviously you'll still have the local levels of representation, so you'll still have representation for those different areas via the other levels of local government. So I think it does mean more democracy, and actually it's better because there'll be greater influence at a government level.
Do you think we'll see this more across the board now in more regions across the United Kingdom? Is that where we're heading with this, Holly?
I think so. I think there's definitely an appetite for devolution in my own area. I know we're in conversations, and if it means more investment for the local area, it can only be a good thing.
Is it a cynical bit of politics? And call me a cynic, call me a grizzled old campaigner, but is this the Conservatives giving more power to an area which is ostensibly Tory-dominated control. So next time round, hey, we're the guys who gave you 1.4 billion, vote for us. Is this just cynical politics?
I don't think so. I think it's we're seeing them all over the country as well. So certainly it's happening in Tory areas, but also more Labour areas as well. So I think it's all about increasing democracy.
Well, Holly Whitbread, thank you for cutting through my Christmas cynicism. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Now, alongside today's border force strikes, the UK could be facing down another 5 months of planned rail strikes from the new year. It's not a good start, is it?
5 months. Network Rail warned that the industrial action will mean that rail travel is significantly disrupted throughout January. So what is the best way for us all to avoid the chaos and still get to our end destination?
Joining us now in the studio is the hardest working man in telly. He's travel expert Simon Cauldron. He's going to give his analysis as to what's going on let's start with border force strikes, shall we, Simon?
Yes.
That seems to be the biggest story of the day so far. What's going on?
Well, I think we are going to see roughly a replay of what we saw last Friday, if anybody can remember that far back to the 23rd of December. I was at Gatwick Airport from very first thing, expecting to talk to passengers who'd be getting off planes and say, oh, I spent 2 hours queuing up. That was what we were warned by EasyJet, the biggest airline at Gatwick. And Manchester Airport had said there was going to be disruption. Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, said maybe you want to rethink your plans, in a horrible echo of all the COVID warnings we had. Anyway, by mid-afternoon, about 100 people I talked to just said, no, it's fine, whether they come through with their families, so they had to go through the proper passport control, or whether they'd been able to use the e-gates. No problems there, no problems at Heathrow, no problems at Manchester. Those are the 3 biggest airports in the UK. There's going to be action there again today, and also at Birmingham, at Glasgow, and at Cardiff airports. I'm not expecting to hop onto a train, if I can find one running, and get to Gatwick to find out what's happening, because my view is we will probably see similar sort of thing. It was so interesting you were talking earlier about whether people were waved through. Yeah. Now, I wasn't there, so I don't know. I was landside, not airside. But my understanding is that all they were doing, they were just checking, is this Ellie's passport? Is that Ellie? Yes. And that's all they were doing, and that's effectively all they needed to do. Any special cases of, does Martin have the right to remain here? There were actual UK Border Force management. So things seemed to go pretty quickly. And it did actually raise the question. And Michael O'Leary, boss of Ryanair, said, why don't you just wave people through? Of course, a million of us who used to travel across from Dover to Calais, we're used to the idea that a French would sort of just see the cover of your passport and off you go. So
Simon, just got to say, first of all, I hardly recognise you without your high-vis vest on, your signature outfit, as it were. Does this fact that basically there's no difference, Border Force aren't even being missed, does that weaken their bargaining position in terms of their pay deal, do you think?
Look, I'm obviously agnostic about the strike. I can absolutely see that 2%, when you are looking at inflation of 10% more than that, is a pretty thin offer. But I fear that the PCS union has, of all the strikes I've covered, this has to be the least effective. And I've covered some pretty ineffective strikes in my time. And of course, at the moment, we got all sorts of very effective strikes going on. And we even had, if you remember, as far back as October, the strike that never was on the railways. The RMT union called it off with a few hours to go. Still absolutely wrecked millions of travel plans for the week.
Well, let's talk about rail now, shall we? Because there's a bit of confusion going on. We were talking about it outside in the studio a little bit earlier. Even on non-strike days, there appears to be massive amounts of disruption. So what's going on the rails, Simon? Well,
we had the kind of usual just after Christmas disruption yesterday. It was a pretty big scale. I was at Paddington Station in central London, where the first trains, because the strike finished at 6 o'clock in the morning, the first train to run anywhere was supposed to be the 7:53 Sheffield to Plymouth. That didn't run because of a separate strike by members of the TSSA union. Then the first train from Edinburgh to Glasgow, which is then going to be the first one, that was cancelled because of signal failure. And finally, at 8:05, we got a service actually running. Unfortunately, it was a rail replacement bus from Manchester Piccadilly to Manchester Airport. Meanwhile, at Paddington, the hub for South Wales and the west of England, first train out to Cardiff and Swansea at 9:18. Hundreds of people had done exactly the right thing. They checked in advance, everything. They were there for the train. It didn't go. Neither did the 9:30. Neither did any train for, till nearly 11 o'clock, by which time there were thousands of passengers there. And this was all due, and some people were laughing about this, I certainly wasn't, all due to North Pole Depot, which is a couple of miles outside the station where the trains are kept overnight, being blocked by overrunning engineering works. So we had the usual start-up chaos. There was also problems in Edinburgh getting trains for the Lumo run to London. So all sorts of problems. But on top of that, we've got these layers of strikes coming up as well.
OK, Simon, there's tons to talk about. I came back from Newark yesterday on the London North Eastern Railway. It was superb. The staff were really, really helpful. Great service. Quickly today, there's a story on the front page of the Daily Mail. Mick Lynch softening his stance. Is that because, again, people largely got by, they got around this strike? Do you think Mick needs to soften his stance because the public will is going against these strikes now, Simon? Well,
we got this odd little message coming from the RMT union on Christmas Eve saying, where's the ministers? We want to talk to them. I think there is the sense that talking to individual railway men and women, those in the front line doing fantastic work, they're exhausted. They have lost hundreds, sometimes thousands of pounds. And, well, the whole idea of the unions, and this goes for the RMT, for ASLEF, the train drivers union, for the TSSA, who, by the way, are knocking out all trains today on West Midlands trains and London North Western Railway. The idea is this is an essential industry. Trouble is, the travelling public is sort of saying, no, you're not. Yeah. And that is eroding their strength. And I think we will, after the next round of massive strikes, starts in 6 days' time, lasts for effectively a week, we will see some kind of settlement.
Because there are some headlines this morning suggesting, as we said in our introduction there, that there could be another 5 months of rail strikes.
Yep.
You're more positive than...
Well, I honestly, I mean, attrition is where we are at the moment, and I don't see that there is an appetite for just, a kind of 80s-style strike going on for months among railway men and women. And every day that this happens, people find an alternative way to travel than going by train, and the railways get into an even worse state than they are at the moment in terms of being a business.
Yeah, well, we're British, aren't we? We keep calm, carry on. That's what we do. We make do amend. Thank you, Simon. Really good to have you with us in the studio.
OK, so let's bring you up to date with all the other stories making the headlines today.
4 people have been injured in a suspected gas explosion at a house in Worcestershire. Emergency services were called to the incident in Evesham last night shortly after 5 p.m. 3 of the injured were taken to hospital and 10 neighbouring properties were evacuated.
And Labour is warning families are losing millions of pounds due to unsolved crimes. The party says more than 1 million thefts weren't solved last year, with cases dropped because the police failed to even find a suspect. Labour called the figures disgraceful. A Home Office spokesperson said the government is supporting the police through record investment and the recruitment of 20,000 additional officers by March 2023.
The UK is facing ice and heavy rain with the potential of flooding in some areas. A yellow rain warning is in place for parts of southwest England and South Wales until 3 p.m. today. Meanwhile, the Met Office has a yellow alert in place for snow and ice in the north and east of Scotland until 10 a.m. Now, we want to know what your New Year's resolutions are today. Are you already starting to think about it? And if so, what may they be? GBViews at gbnews.uk. Do let us know. What are you thinking, Martin? Have you thought about your New Year's resolutions?
Yeah, I think I need to get a few more early nights. Well, in this job, there's no choice, is there? Well,
do you know what? That's a really good idea.
What time do you go to bed?
I should go a lot earlier. Last night it was 8 p.m.
That's not bad.
What about you?
I was about 7:30. Well, I did watch
Oh, you were very good.
I watched the Forest Man United first half. I'm a Forest fan, and the first half, I'm afraid, was enough.
Oh, right. It literally sent you to sleep.
No, we were losing 2-0 and it was quite depressing.
Oh, I see.
But Paul will tell us about
You
that.
cried yourself to sleep.
I did, on my tear-stained pillow. I'm used to that as a Forest fan.
Oh, no. Well, that's a good one, actually, an early night. Because I was thinking the other day, I was asked about this, and I said, I haven't got one yet. Not because I think I'm bad at it or anything. There's probably quite a long list of things I could do. But early nights is a good place to... is a good place to start. So do let us know what your New Year's resolution may be, gbviews@gbnews.uk. And also we're talking about Betwixtmas. I got in trouble with that yesterday with...
a funny word. It's a bit like Brexit meets Christmas. Betwixtmas.
So it's that funny time between Christmas and New Year. I think it's about 6 days where you just don't know what the day of the week is, when you put your bins out. I mean, we're just...
I'm there.
Is that what you're already there, aren't you?
I don't know what day it is. No.
Neither do I, actually. Let's have a look. No. Wednesday.
It's Wednesday. It is
Wednesday today. And what are you up to? We're here at work. You might be having some fun, having some selection boxes, Christmas leftovers. Let us know. Send us your pictures. We've been having lots of pet pictures in the last few days. It's been great fun.
You can't beat a pet, yeah?
No, you can't. Now, the 8th of September 2022 is a day that will go down in history. Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II died peacefully at her summer retreat in Balmoral Castle.
Well, our royal reporter Cameron Walker looks back on that day and the events that followed.
The news that everyone was dreading happened. Buckingham Palace has announced that the Queen has died peacefully at Balmoral.
A day that is now etched in history.
Queen Elizabeth II was the rock on which modern Britain was built. Our country has grown and flourished under her reign. Britain is the great country it is today because of her.
Thousands gathered at royal residences to lay flowers and Paddington bears, a nod to Her late Majesty's surprise sketch at her Platinum Jubilee. Immediately, Charles ascended the throne and was formally proclaimed king at the Accession Council in St James's Palace. Politicians, past and present, united in grief despite their party differences.
He'd lost his mother on the Thursday. Here he was on the Saturday morning, standing in front of all of his Privy Councillors. They're his Privy Councillors now.
The King paid tributes to his beloved mother and renewed her pledge of lifelong service.
Hi everyone, thank you so much.
An olive branch from Prince William to his brother Prince Harry, when the siblings reunited to greet the public with their wives and view flowers outside Windsor. Any reconciling was short-lived. The Queen's coffin, accompanied by her daughter Princess Anne, was driven to St Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh to lie at rest. An opportunity for the people of Scotland to pay their last respects to the Queen of the United Kingdom. An RAF C-17 flew Her late Majesty back to London. The state hearse, specially designed for the public to see inside, drove down crowd-lined streets before one final night in Buckingham Palace. A well-rehearsed ceremonial procession brought the Queen to Westminster Hall so the public could pay their last respects as Her late Majesty lay in state.
People would queue for hours on end. They'd finally get in and it would be 5 seconds, 6 seconds, and it just happened so beautifully and so peacefully.
The state gun carriage of the Royal Navy, pulled by 142 Royal Naval ratings, took Queen Elizabeth II's coffin to Westminster Abbey for the state funeral. At the King's request, the wreath on top of the coffin contained flowers from the gardens of Buckingham Palace, Clarence House and Highgrove. The royal family's dignity and stoicism shone through in the face of unimaginable grief. Princess Charlotte's choice of brooch, in the shape of a horseshoe, was gifted by her great-grandmother, the Queen. She, alongside her future king brother George, processed behind the coffin with their parents, the Prince and Princess of Wales. The state hearse to Windsor Castle for the committal service. More than 800 people, including the Queen's personal staff, filled St George's Chapel, in stark contrast to Prince Philip's funeral, where just 30 people could attend because of COVID restrictions. The imperial state crown, the orb and the sceptre were removed from the coffin and placed on the high altar. The King then placed the Queen's camp colour of the Grenadier Guards on the coffin. The wand broken, creating the symmetry with the 3 instruments of state being removed, ready to be passed on to their successor. The Queen was buried with her late husband Prince Philip in a private service in the King George VI Memorial Chapel. Back together for eternity. Cameron Walker, GB News.
It really was the saddest day, wasn't it?
was.
I was down in Windsor, and we did think. Remember, there was an announcement that she was sick and the family were visiting. And I made my way to Windsor, and just honestly, the throng of people coming and just showing their love, it was just so moving.
I think the King's speech was like part of that healing process. We talk about me. I wasn't that impressed with the King's speech.
Were you not?
That's just me, no.
Oh no, I thought he did a very good job. So difference of opinion there.
There we go.
Now, after the break, Showbiz reporter Ellie Phillips will be joining us to bring you all the latest news and gossip from the world of celebrity. But first, let's take a look at the weather for you. The UK is looking wet and windy for some, with the driest weather in the north. Heavy rain will affect southwest England through this morning, bringing a risk of flooding and potential travel disruption. A mild but windy start to the day, with coastal gales likely. Rain will affect London and southeast England this morning. It will be mostly light. There will be some heavy bursts too, becoming increasingly windy. It will be a wet and blustery start for southern Wales, with spells of heavy rain that could cause disruption to transport this morning. Across the Midlands, rain will spread northeastwards through this morning, with some heavy bursts expected at times. It will be a mild but increasingly windy day, especially to the lee of high ground. It will be a dry but generally cloudy start to today across northeast England. Rain will start to move in from the southwest through this morning, with some heavy spells at times, becoming windy. A dry but icy start across southern Scotland this morning, with some clear spells. Rain will move into the far south towards midday, though this will be mostly light at first. A band of rain will spread northeastwards across Northern Ireland through this morning, with some heavy bursts expected, becoming breezy towards midday, especially around northern and eastern coasts. Rain will continue northeastwards, with strong winds becoming widespread. Showers will follow this evening, some of which will be heavy. And that is how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, We're
on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. Clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Top of the morning, it's 6:26 and still to come on today's programme. At 6:45, we reflect on the legacy of the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham and the boost it's given to the city.
In the next hour, we'll be looking ahead at the likely impact of rolling industrial action that's planned for the new year. We'll have some advice on how to plan travel around the rail strikes.
And get in touch in all the usual ways, GB Views at gbnews.uk or tweet us at GB News. Get involved and make sure you mention your town so we'll give you a shout out.
now it's time to go over the latest showbiz stories in the entertainment world with showbiz reporter Ellie Phillips, who joins us now. Martin's in an Ellie sandwich. Good morning to Ellie, how are you? And you're still
morning, thank you. I'm in that betwixt
good
mode.
You still look very festive in your glittery dress. I love it.
Forever sparkles, that's my rule.
Oh, brilliant. Right, well, let's start with another glamorous queen, shall we? Ariana Grande, still doing amazing stuff for the children of Manchester. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Ariana Grande, since children were killed in the blast at the arena that she was performing at years ago, she sends them Christmas presents to the family of those bereaved every year, and she's done it again this year. It isn't something that she does for publicity, it's something that she does with the good of her heart. She's a really incredible individual, Ariana Grande, so this is just a really special one. Each time this year it reminds us that, you know, she is, an artist that we love to love, and that she does things that she doesn't need to do. No one's expecting this of her, but yeah, she's been delivering presents or having presents delivered to those bereaved.
Cliff, Harry Potter, when he's not moaning about J.K. Rowling and biting the hand that feeds him, sorry to be a bit cynical, he's posted record profits this year, Ellie.
Yeah, this is crazy because we think of Harry Radcliffe and, Daniel Radcliffe, that we know as Harry Potter. And we think, well, what's he done in these past few years or whatever? But actually, he's made some very savvy investments, and that's meant that he has made extraordinary sums this year, more than we could ever imagine. And so, yeah, fair play to him. I mean, keep it going.
The Harry Potter kids are just incredible, aren't they? I mean, They got picked up at 10 or 11. They made X amount of millions making those films. I mean, something like, I once read Draco Malfoy had something like 6 minutes of speech across those films, because he doesn't say a lot really apart from Potter, and he's just made so much money.
I know, this is absolutely insane. I mean, they've all gone to do different things. Obviously, we know some have gone into philanthropy, some have gone into human rights issues. But yeah, accounts filed last Friday specifically for Daniel Radcliffe has revealed that he's amassed more than £90 million and makes profit of more than 2.2 million every year. That's incredible sums of money for someone who, realistically, we know for something that he did in his childhood. Really, it's crazy.
What's your take on this idea of all of the kind of Potter stars having a pop at the creator J.K. Rowling? I mean, I agree with her position, the common sense position on women's rights. But is that kind of verboten in the world of showbiz now? Do you have to go along with this kind of trans politics thing to make sure you keep earning £2.2 million a year? Is it like the new thing you have to adhere to?
I'm not sure that it's necessarily that. I think that all of the stars, the young stars that came out of the Harry Potter films, have always pretty much been incredibly outspoken about issues, LGBTQ+ issues, human rights issues, and such. And so I'm not sure that it is. And I think that fair play to them. Everyone is entitled to have their own opinion, and some people might shy away from that because, to a huge degree, they owe their success to this individual, and so speaking out against them would seem like something you wouldn't do. But actually, isn't it a good thing that we're all okay to say what we really think and feel, and actually have that discourse put out there so that people can be educated on these matters? And that actually, if it wasn't for them speaking out against it, then would it really become such a topic for younger people to engage in? So I'm actually all for it, to be honest.
Ellie, we haven't got long with you, but I want to ask about Taylor Swift, because I need to tell you something. Spotify told me I was in the top 5% of Taylor Swift fans worldwide with my yearly Wrapped data. So I listen to a lot of Taylor Swift, and now she's just going out there making vinyl albums to outsell CDs. Tell us a bit more about this.
Oh, you'll be happy about this one as a bona fide Swiftie. Yeah, Taylor Swift has helped vinyl albums outsell CDs in the UK for the first time in about 35 years. And that's with her album Midnight. It's the biggest selling vinyl record of the century in the UK. And I think that's incredible because, as when I grew up, it was all about tape recorders. And listening to vinyls was seen as something as a bit of a novelty. So it's great now that, CD decline lines have been in decline for the past 2 decades, and actually that vinyl has made such a comeback, and it's such a special thing when you see people get them out and play them. It's a real passion for music and a love, and I think it's great that she's brought that back, considering that she is a modern day artist. She's not someone that necessarily would even have to record on vinyl or ever have had to record on vinyl, that she's decided to do that and bring it back. I think it's brilliant.
Well, Ellie, she is brilliant, and that's what she does. Just does brilliant stuff for us all the time.
Swifties!
Lots more to look forward to in 2023. Ellie, thank you so much for coming on the programme and brightening our day as you always do. Now, after the break, we'll be taking a first look at this morning's papers. We'll see you shortly.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Well, welcome back, and let's bring you up to date with all the stories making the front page of the papers today.
The Eye covers the escalating train strikes, with thousands to be balloted again over a new tactic to increase the number of major walkouts across the network.
The Mail has an exclusive. Union barons have launched a loyalty card scheme for strikers designed, it claims, to artificially swell picket line numbers.
The Telegraph says the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst is today urged to tackle an allegedly toxic culture of sexual assault embedded within the institution.
And the Express says thousands of vulnerable cancer patients are being stranded in isolation without support during the cost of living crisis.
The Guardian says that hundreds of voluntary organisations have been forced to shut or scale back operations because of government delays in replacing EU funding. Well, it's time to go through the papers now, and joining us this morning is political editor of Sunday People, Nigel Nelson, and former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall. And this is a very exciting morning for us all at GB News, because, Claire and Nigel, you are a real-life couple, and you've never done the newspaper review together.
Yeah. And you have quite different political views.
And we have different political views as well.
We do.
So we're expecting it to kick off.
We'll do our best.
So keep us apart.
Superb. But it's great to see, though, that on a serious note, before we move on, that within a relationship, different political views can coexist. And we can disagree, but still love each other, can't we?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talk about politics endlessly because we both work in politics. We disagree a lot, but we've never, ever fallen out over politics.
Well, the morning is young. So let's move on, Claire. Let's kick off with you to the Eye. And this is about the fresh strike ballots plan. What's going on?
Now, this is a plan from the unions to go about strikes in an even more fascist manner, if I can say that, by increasing the amount of strikes that we have, as if we've not suffered enough with continual walkouts. This is now going to ballot individuals, so it could be station staff, it could be controllers, it could be tube workers. So each time, a different group will be balloted on strike action. So you could end up with continual rolling strikes going through from the different parts of the service.
So call me a cynic. Is this different unions operating in isolation so they can maximise the impact and cause the most misery?
That is precisely what it is. So, as I say, as if we've not suffered enough, you could then turn up to a station and find that train drivers are working, but station staff aren't, or signallers aren't. So your service is still going to be particularly affected. It's going to be very, very poor, right at the time where we need it to come back to some kind of normality.
Do you think we're heading towards a general strike? Is that where this is all going?
You can't have a general strike, so it won't be that. That would be against the law if they did that. However, what you will have is more coordinated strikes, which is what this is designed to do. I mean, this will be our first disagreement this morning because I believe in the right to strike and Claire doesn't. So yes, I mean, the idea of coordinated walkouts is on the cards, and again, if you, regardless of each individual dispute and what you think about them, if you believe in the right to strike, surely you must believe also they have to be effective. If that's the most effective way of doing it.
But that brings us neatly onto your story, the Daily Mail front page, the strike map. This is union barons encouraging people to go on multiple picket lines to get prizes, rewards. This is basically looking like a flying picket to me. Banned by Margaret Thatcher in 1990, Nigel.
It would be if they broke the law, that's right. Flying pickets are banned. And I mean, it does sound a bit like sort of, nectar cards for turning up on a picket line, double points if you stoke a brazier or something like that. Actually, what it is, the prize is in fact be a free T-shirt. It's not that great a prize at the end of it. But the idea is to encourage people to go on picket lines. Now, nothing illegal about that. You or I could join a picket line were you so inclined. So the idea of actually encouraging people onto picket lines, no bad thing. It's not, although the Daily Mail's got quite worked up about this, I think it's perfectly okay.
No bad thing. So it's no bad thing to encourage people out onto a picket line to enforce complete chaos on millions of passengers for a free T-shirt. So you could have a free T-shirt that said, "I caused rail chaos," and walk around proudly with it, and you see no problem with that.
Is it like every day at your breakfast table?
Pretty much. I find this so abhorrent that you can think that it is a good idea to encourage people to do this.
But it's perfectly legal to go on a picket line. So
I'm not suggesting
if you want to join a
isn't.
picket line and show your support for striking workers, nothing to prevent you. If they want to give the odd prize to go out there and you fancy a new T-shirt, I don't see too much wrong with this.
Before we move on to the next story, this idea that flying pickets were banned by Margaret Thatcher in 1990, I'm a son of a coal miner. Hello, Dad, he's watching, love you. And, we saw what Scargill did to the pits. Is Mick Lynch proving to be the Scargill of our era? Is the public running out of sympathy with him? Because I think they are. I think we've worked around the train strikes quite comfortably. And is it not time, Claire, as a Conservative, as somebody who wants to put the boot in, is it not time that Mick Lynch got it in the neck from Rishi Sunak?
Well, absolutely should. And there is a bill currently going through Parliament that will have a minimum requirement for service on railways. But it needs to be much stronger. This needs to have come a lot quicker. And unfortunately, what we haven't seen is that kind of determination from the Prime Minister to get this done. As you say, as Margaret Thatcher did, she was very adamant that this was how she was going to react. We haven't seen that at the moment. I'm hoping that in the new year, given all of the chaos that we're just about to go through, Rishi Sunak comes out and is a lot stronger on the unions and quickly.
What do you think, Nigel? 2023?
Well, I mean, the whole thing is that the unions will oppose it, and quite rightly so. There's not much point having a strike if they don't work. So what the government should be doing is sitting down and negotiating the new pay deal. That I don't think it's acceptable to be offering people 3 and 4% when inflation is knocking 10%. So if the government sat down and talked about it, I'm not suggesting you get an inflation rise, but simply that you actually talk about some kind of settlement. That's what the government won't do, and that would be a way of actually stopping these strikes.
OK, Claire, moving on now to the front page of today's Times. Prevent, the government's counter-terrorism scheme, long been criticised, and there's a fallout between Braverman and Gove because they can't name certain organisations for fear of being called Islamophobic.
And I think there is your real problem. This is a report that has been a long time in the making. William Shawcross, who is the author of the review, has put it together, and now there is a row going on between the Home Secretary and Michael Gove, the Head of Communities, whose remit the Prevent scheme falls under. And he wants that report to be out there in full. He thinks that we need to get that published as soon as possible. There is this problem with the Home Office wanting to redact certain parts of the information in case it's...
Why would they do that? Because, I mean, they're trying to prevent offending organisations which have been proven to be a part of the problem.
But the Prevent programme as a whole has been problematic, and I think we can all see that. It was one of those schemes that was set up, and it was very laudable in its aims to begin with. It was set up under Tony Blair. But unfortunately, if you don't have buy-in from the communities that are the major part of this programme, you're going to struggle to get this through. And I think this is what it came up against, was people thought it was a racist piece of propaganda targeting Islamic cultures.
Which is nonsense, because it happened to be an issue within that community. Therefore, surely it needs to be targeted.
Absolutely, and I think this is always your problem. If you cannot sell it into those communities by saying, we need your help, we need your assistance, but you promote it as you must do this to stop Islamist terrorists coming into Britain, coming and radicalising our teenagers. And I think that was the problem. It was packaged so badly that those communities felt very offended by saying, we aren't the problem and we're not going to help you, the government is racist. And I think you never change that narrative. And now what we're having is an argument over some semantics and some names going out in a report, which I absolutely do think need to be published. And I think the public who pay for this scheme and people that have attended it need to understand the communities involved. They need to understand the charities and groups involved in this. So it absolutely must go out as soon as possible.
And there's an issue, of course, about public money going to some of these charities. And if public money is being used to counter the interests of the British public, Nigel, that surely there's a public interest in that.
Yeah, well, of course there is. But I do agree with Claire, by the way, that the report should go out. Sorry about that. Yeah, I mean, certainly the report should be published. There's been a lot of criticism of Prevent on the grounds it might be discriminatory. And as Claire's pointed out, some organisations won't take part in it. But broadly, the idea of it is very good. That's why the report should go out there so they can have another look at it and make sure it actually works.
We've got time for one more.
Yeah, we do. Claire, let's have a look at...
Nigel's got one.
No, Nigel's... Let's go with you, shall we? What do you want, diets or...
Hey, let's do diets. Yeah, why not?
Yeah,
it's Christmas and we'll all put on a few pounds.
Yeah, let's talk about diets in the Times.
Well, I consider this story vindication for not doing any diets. That what the Times is saying is that if you go and try out these fad diets, what it eventually does is make you fatter in the long run. So anything that promises sort of instant weight loss probably won't work. And what you should do is actually report them, according to the Times, to the Advertising Standards Authority. So broadly, the advice is don't look for quick fixes. Don't go on boiled egg diets or water diets, which sound revolting anyway. Just carry on getting gently fat.
I was about to say the boiled egg diet, I'm hoping won't catch on in the Purcell Nelson house. Well, that could make for an unpleasant life.
You're absolutely right, and it won't.
But don't we have this subject coming up every single year when it comes up to New Year? Everybody's overindulged at Christmas because that's what it's about. You come to the New Year and everybody suddenly wants to start exercising and start drinking water every 2 2 minutes. And we know that it doesn't work. And you need to have the willpower and you need to reduce your calorie intake and increase your activity level. It isn't really that difficult. It's just really uncomfortable and unpleasant, and we don't like doing it.
Are you one of those wives that kind of cracks the whip on the diets in the household?
Do you know what? It's absolutely pointless.
Yeah.
I have to hide certain foods because at 3 in the morning there will be a chocolate run down to the kitchen.
Can't miss the 3 in the morning chocolate run.
Nigel, you're a secret eater. No, brilliant to have you both on. Nigel and Claire, thank you very much. With us all morning as well.
Looking forward to the next run. OK, well, let's bring you up to date with the other stories making the headlines today.
West Midlands Police have named a 23-year-old man who was killed at a nightclub in Birmingham on Boxing Day as Cody Fisher. Officers were called to the Crane nightclub after reports that a man had been stabbed on the dance floor. Hundreds of people were at the club at the time, and witnesses are being urged to come forward. Awful story.
And the city of Buffalo in New York State has started the cleanup after a severe blizzard hit it, causing 28 fatalities, with many people freezing to death in their cars. Authorities have been digging out from under 4 feet of snow after a record amount of snowfall. Across the US, at least 60 people have died because of this severe storm.
Some families could experience a tax rate of at least 80% in 2023 due to a collision between 2 welfare systems. That's according to the Resolution Foundation. Around 50,000 families will see child benefits withdrawn at the same time as universal credit.
Well, we want to know what your New Year's resolutions are today and how you're enjoying Betwixtmas. What a strange word that is. That time between Christmas and New Year, please send in your pictures. If you've got any pets, anything fun like that, please get it over. We could all do with cheering up, couldn't we, Eddie?
Absolutely.
This time of year.
Yes, and lots of you have been in touch with us this morning. Here are just a few views on the other stories of today. Kathy has been in touch. She says, between Mick Lynch, the government, and various greedy owners and shareholders, the railways are going down. The government's telling people we must be greener, use public transport, for example, trains. Yep. Surely this is a joke. Prices everywhere are a disgrace. At least I know if I use my car, I know I'm likely to reach my planned destination. I think you've got a point there.
That is a really interesting point, because this whole kind of war on the motorists, which is the government kind of backdrop now, I think it's backfired badly over these train strikes. People have to take to their cars just to get around.
Absolutely.
Anyway, Trevor from Lincolnshire says the problem now is people get a wage and start spending, putting everything on credit. So when hard times come, they have no money because the wage just about covers the credit they have. But they expect the taxpayer, many who are on less wages, to pay more tax to cover their greed.
Steve's been in touch. He says, I can remember militant tendency and how they brought this country to its knees. Thankfully, Maggie Thatcher was strong enough to stand up to them. We must not allow the Marxist militant unions to undermine our government. The unions are there to protect workers' rights, not to wreck our democracy.
And I just wish he would be a bit more outspoken in his belief then. He wasn't quite sort of sitting on the fence. OK. And on having an elected mayor, Dean from South Bristol says, because they have their mayor there, an elected mayor was disastrous for Bristol. In fact, it was so bad the city have voted to abolish an elected mayor. Remember that, he was kicked out. Marvin Rees, ignoring the public what they wanted, Marvin Rees was the one who supported the statue being taken down, and then he got kicked out. So just go show you, if you feed the woke mob, it doesn't really necessarily get you anywhere, really.
But do let us know if you're in Bristol. Let us know what your thoughts are on an elected mayor. GBnews at gbnews.uk, and in Manchester as well. We've got Andy Burnham. What do you make of him?
He's very popular there.
He is very popular there. So how would people in the North East feel? And if you're watching us in the North East, let us know where you're watching us from. How would you feel about an directly elected mayor in the North East? And they'd be in charge of things like building and transport.
Transport and lots of really important things. People want us to have more autonomy. I'm just a little bit cynical about more middle management and clipboards in town halls.
Yeah.
That's just me.
Do you like the idea of localised power? Let us know. gbviews at gbnews.uk.
Well, as the year draws to a close, Birmingham is reflecting on its time hosting the Commonwealth Games. The city is reportedly now drawing up plans to turn it into a sports hub.
Yes, the conversation is turning to how to use the city and local sporting organisations to build a legacy over the coming year, and how young people can be positively impacted in the community.
Our West Midlands reporter Jack Carson has this report.
2022 has been a huge year for Birmingham. As host to one of the biggest sporting events in the world, billions of people tuned into the Commonwealth Games taking place here in the West Midlands. This month, the official thank you event has been held to mark the end of the year of the Games and reflect on what Council leader Ian Ward believes was a hugely successful summer.
5 million people came into the city during the Commonwealth Games. 5 times the population of the city came to our city to be part of that global event. It was a huge, huge success. I've never seen an atmosphere in the city of Birmingham like the one we had during the Games this summer, and the Commonwealth Games federations were kind enough to say to us that it wasn't just a Commonwealth Games, it was the best ever Commonwealth Games.
Also at the ceremony was the handing over of the Queen's baton, which will be displayed in the city. Now this part of the West Midlands turns its attention to how to build a Games legacy. For Birmingham City Council, that starts in the community.
Well, we're investing now in grassroots community sport, grassroots community culture as a legacy from the Games. We're also creating a cultural festival. There will be an annual event here in the city centre, but we'll look to connect out all of our communities into that festival in the same way as we did with the Commonwealth Games.
Along with investment from the council, Sport England are providing £35 million worth of combined national lottery and government funding to ensure the effect of Birmingham 2022 is felt for people across the city and the country as well. Chief Executive Tim Hollingsworth says it's about giving young people access to sport.
Well, I think the most important thing for sport now, particularly coming out of the Birmingham Games, is to understand that we do not have equal access and opportunity to playing sport and being physically active. There are significant barriers to entry and some very stubborn inequalities, actually. The ambition is to enable people locally, regionally and indeed ultimately nationally to have more activity in their lives, to feel the benefit of that for their physical, mental health and well-being, their sense of community, and perhaps most of all to have ensured that those who previously felt more excluded, less engaged by sport, have had the chance because of the programmes that we've run.
One community project receiving funding is the Impact Fitness Academy, a group in Birmingham trying to make a difference to people's lives through combat sports such as freestyle wrestling and boxing. Assistant coach Hanaya Kusar stresses the importance of that money for projects like this.
It's helped us build our business and start to get more equipment and allow us to increase our class numbers so that we can reach wider community areas.
The next Commonwealth Games are to be held in Victoria, Australia in 2026, and there'll be expectations for them to put on a show like Birmingham did. In the meantime, this city is starting to build its legacy and keep that Games spirit alive. Jack Carson, GB News.
Hello. Now, I know the travel chaos is a bit of a depressing story, but I travelled back on the train yesterday from Newark. I had a painless journey, but all that everybody was talking about was the travel chaos, and in particular, how they've become, they get to a stage where they cannot rely on trains. Right. So I spoke to this lady at Newark station, and she was amazing. And she was telling me that people that had booked tickets on the Trainline app got to the stations on Christmas Eve to find out the trains didn't even exist and couldn't get refunds. We're having to drive as far as Newark to Edinburgh, having to hire cars. And I'm just interested in people's opinions out there. You know, I was saying earlier that there's this war on the motorist. They're trying to force us onto public transport, and then you can't rely on it when you need it most, Ellie. And I wonder if these strikes have kind of backfired in that sense.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that you say that, because even yesterday, I mean, anecdotally, I was looking to go into London, and I just didn't even bother looking on the train app. I thought, do you know what, I'll just get the tube, get an Uber, get a tube. And you just avoid it totally, don't you, because you're so used to the chaos. So it is a problem. Is that how you're feeling out there? We know lots of people are doing travelling at the moment. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Well, still stay with us, because there's lots more to come. The winter of discontent will continue as Border Force staff continue their industrial action. Severe travel disruption, as we're saying, is expected to continue in the coming days, with delays at the borders, long queues at airports, and even flights at risk of being cancelled for thousands of jet setters. But first, let's get the weather for you. And the UK is looking wet and windy for some, with the driest weather in the north. Heavy rain will affect southwest England through this morning, bringing a risk of flooding and potential travel disruption. Mild but windy start to the day, with coastal gales likely. Rain will affect London and southeast England this morning. It will be mostly light, but there will be some heavy bursts too, becoming increasingly windy. It will be wet and blustery start for southern Wales with spells of heavy rain that could cause delays to transport this morning. Across the Midlands, rain will spread north-eastwards through this morning with some heavy bursts expected at times. It will be mild but increasingly windy day, especially to the lee of high ground. It will be a dry and generally cloudy start today across northeast England. Rain will start to move in from the southwest through this morning with some heavy spells at times, becoming windy. A dry but icy start across southeast Scotland this morning with some clear spells. Rain will move into far south towards midday, though this will be mostly light at first. A band of rain will spread northeastwards across Northern Ireland through this morning with some heavy bursts expected, becoming breezy towards midday, especially around northern and eastern coasts. Rain will continue northeastwards with strong winds becoming widespread. Showers will follow this evening, some of which will be heavy. And that is how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride. Oh, she's on it today! Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Well, top of the morning, it's 7 o'clock on Wednesday, the 28th of December. This is Breakfast on GB News with Ellie Costello and myself, Martin Dorby. And here's what's leading the news this morning.
An elected mayor for the North East is on the cards as the government announces a £1.4 billion devolution plan for the region. It's part of Michael Gove's levelling up agenda. Good idea, or yet another layer of bureaucracy in local government? Let us know what you think.
And members of the armed forces will be on site at airports across the country today, again, to cover for Border Force staff who are staging yet another day of industrial action. Holiday makers face the prospect of long queues and cancelled flights.
And in the year that we lost Her Majesty the Queen, our royal correspondent reflects on the events of the 8th of September 2022 and a nation in mourning.
Plus, we're asking if it's healthy to be selfish. What do you make about that? Healthy to be selfish?
Not to be selfish, but sometimes to put yourself first is not a bad thing, especially if you're not very good at saying no.
Well, that's what we speak to an expert about who thinks that embracing selfishness is the best way to avoid stress and burnouts. Coming later on.
Yep, and you can join in any of our discussions this morning by emailing gbnews@gbnews.uk or tweet us at gbnews. Now, industrial action by Border Force staff is resuming today and is expected to impact dozens of airports around the country, along with the port of Newhaven.
Yeah, yet more chaos is expected. This unwelcome news could mean lengthy queues, delays at the border, and even possibly cancelled flights with winter holidaymakers.
Yes, comes as a wave of strikes rattled numerous public services roles this month, though contingency plans, including the deployment of service personnel, did prove to be effective during the first round before Christmas.
And with us this morning is Holly Whitbread, the Conservative Councillor for Epping and Thaydon, Essex. Before we talk about Border Force, another story that gets geeks like me excited is the political devolution. And this is proposed in the North East, an elected mayor for the region. How does that work, and why is Michael Gove, the Levelling Up Secretary, so keen to make it happen?
So devolution essentially gives more power to local areas, and you have kind of a mayor at the head almost being accountable, and also that key kind of connection with government lobbying for more funding. It also gives local authorities more power in terms of infrastructure and also in terms of delivering affordable housing as well.
So levelling up was a key message that they promised to deliver in 2019, the Get Brexit Done election. There hasn't been a great deal of it. 140, is it 140, how much? 140 billion?
Billion, yeah.
That's a lot of money. Is this something that people will welcome in the region, or is it, call me a cynic, the Conservative Party buying votes through giving a chunk of money ahead of an election where, let's face it, they're looking like they're in trouble?
I think actually it means more democracy, so it's only a good thing for local areas, and actually also better transport links. And I know particularly in that region of the country there are particular challenges around that. Yeah. But when the Conservatives won the election in 2019, the Levelling Up bill, which has gone through Parliament, part of that was these devolution deals, which is all about giving more power to local people.
And will power actually be given to local people? Will changes actually be made? Is this a positive, or is this just another level of red tape, of bureaucracy that's just going to make things so much longer?
I think it's a good thing because it simplifies democracy. It has that one kind of key person who is accountable. Where I come from at the moment, democracy is often overcomplicated at a local level because you've got 3 different tiers of local government and people kind of bundle them all up into the same thing anyway. So I think it's quite good to simplify local democracy and make people understand it more as well, actually.
Is the danger, though, here, like here we are in London, we have Sadiq Khan, and I'm no fan of Sadiq Khan, I think that's pretty... spoke about that before. And what we can see often is local areas kind of going at loggerheads with central government, trying to devolve power. Is this just a sort of regionalised, cynical power grab? In this instance, so the Tories, if they do get booted out, they've got a nice stronghold in the North East and it'll give them something to build off down the line. I'm sorry for being a cynic, but I do think there is an element of that.
Well, it's all about democracy, and I mean that it won't necessarily be a Tory mayor in that new deal. But we have seen devolution across the country in both Conservative-minded and more Labour-minded places. So I think ultimately it's a good thing because it's about increasing democracy and accountability.
Should we talk about the Border Force strikes that we're going to see happen from today until New Year's Eve? Could see disruption, that's what we've got in our headlines, but the previous time this happened, just before Christmas, things were actually going pretty smoothly when the Army stepped in to help.
Yeah, I mean, there's been reports of a lot of efficiency at airports when these strikes are going on, so well done to the Army, although obviously they shouldn't have to be doing this, and it is really disappointing that these strikes have gone ahead, these politicised strikes, which are causing travel chaos at Christmas, which is very unfair. And
I do think that we've seen the Army, the Navy and the Air Force personnel at airports, the very best of British, and thanks everyone out there, any sort of service personnel who've been involved, you are fantastic. I'd like to see more of those sort of people involved at our coasts. involved in our immigration system. Now, what about you? Don't you think it'd be great to have more Navy in the Channel stopping the dinghies?
Well, I think they'd probably argue that they've got other things to do as well. But I think the efficiency we've seen from the Army and our armed forces is something that the Border Force can learn from, both in terms of kind of immigration, but also efficiency at airports as well.
Let's get your crystal ball out, Holly, shall we? What are you going to see, or what do you think we're going to see in the first few months of January with this strike action? I mean, the unions that are representing Border Force staff are asking for 10%, which some would say is a lot more reasonable than perhaps, you know, what the nurses are suggesting at 19% currently. Do you think it would be time for Rishi Sunak to compromise, especially in this set of strikes with Border Force? It doesn't look like it's going too well in their favour because things are running so smoothly.
I think the government needs to stay resolute in terms of those unreasonable pay demands. Across the public sector, the demands that are being asked for are just unaffordable. Rishi Sunak has said quite rightly the priority is tackling inflation, and if we give in to all of those different demands, it could cost the average taxpayer £1,000, which is just not fair, and why should ordinary taxpayers be picking up the bill?
And in the new year, the Conservatives got a lot of work to do. Are you confident that the Tories can build back from where they are? Because everyone's more or less saying that at the moment it looks like Starmer's a shoo-in. But 2 years is a long time in politics, isn't it, Holly?
It is a long time in politics, and we've seen there's been a lot of changes over the past year. I think Rishi's got a really difficult set of challenges this year, but I'm confident he's focusing on the right thing, so tackling inflation, but also the challenges we have with illegal immigration as well.
Well, I think that's certainly something that's all over. I mean, I was in Nottingham, that's where I'm from, at the Christmas period, and people are really talking about illegal immigration and asylum hotels. This is one that won't go away. Holly, I know it's something you care passionately about.
Yeah, I think it's a huge challenge for the government, and I'm pleased to see that Rishi has kind of taken responsibility for this personally, and that he's set out a plan about tackling this. Obviously, it's a huge challenge, and I think there's a challenge diplomatically as well as on the ground as well. But Rishi certainly needs to get this sorted.
Well, Holly Whitbread, I admire your enthusiasm in this betwixtmas period. Thanks for coming in today.
Thank you.
Now, alongside ongoing Border Force strikes, the UK could be facing down another 5 months of planned rail strikes from the new year.
Well, Network Rail warned that the industrial action will mean rail travel is significantly disrupted through December and January. So, what is the best way for us all to avoid the chaos and still get to our end destination?
Well, joining us now in the studio is friend of the programme and travel expert Simon Calder. Simon, this isn't what people want to hear. Is it more disruption for December and January? What's going on?
Well, let me refer back to Holly talking about the Rishi Sunak putting immigration at absolutely the top of his agenda. Mark Harper, the new Transport Secretary, 2 months ago, said solving the rail dispute was top of his agenda. Unfortunately, all we've seen since then is that things have got worse. Can I just bring you up to date on where we are today? 12 noon, strike by members of the Transport Salaried Staffs Association, that's the white-collar union, begins at West Midlands Trains and London North Western Railway. That's going to wipe out all services today and tomorrow on those trains. Bear in mind that Chiltern is already saying we're not going to run any trains on our Midlands network because of the overtime ban that's carrying on with the RMT union. Great Western Railway, they've also got a strike, same time, 12 noon for 24 hours, but they so far are saying that actually rail engineering works, which of course are part of the Great Twixmas festivities, those are going to be causing more disruption. But going into next week, I mean, rail engineering works, which include, for instance, the closure of London Liverpool Street Station, one of the big hubs in the UK. That ends on the 3rd of January, which is exactly when the next 48-hour strike by the RMT begins. Then you've got a kind of guest, a special Thursday strike by members of ASLEF, the train drivers' union, which is probably going to cause the absolute most damage. Then you've got another 48-hour strike by the RMT. And the first day that the rail industry is saying it would be fine to travel is the 9th of January. So it's almost 2 weeks of, wouldn't go near a train if I were you.
And it's starting to feel, Simon, call me a cynic again, that this is different unions kind of joining up, topping and tailing strike action to cause maximum impact. Now, you speak to hundreds of passengers at train hubs, at airports. What's the public mood like around these strikes now? Is it waning? Do they just want Britain get back? Are they sick of the unions?
Well, it's now, I think, at the plague on both your houses stage, in the sense that I think people have got it that this is the government that's calling the shots. Effectively, while they're saying, oh, no, this is a dispute with the train operators and Network Rail. No, it isn't. The Department for Transport and ultimately the Treasury and Number 10 are saying what is going to be allowed. So the government on one side, the unions on the other. A lot of people, I talk to railway people, I talk to passengers the whole time. And the sense among passengers is actually, well, probably the rail workers are, relatively speaking, most of them relatively well rewarded. There are most certainly people who are on low pay, and maybe the sort of settlement which Network Rail came up, which was 5% last year, 4% this year, but with a special uplift to people who are at the bottom of the pay scale, would be a good way forward. They're also getting all kinds of family and friends travel concessions thrown in, and I think that which was put out by the RMT to its members with a recommendation to reject. I think something which looks very similar to that could come back for Network Rail and hopefully the train operators. But we've got to endure another couple of weeks of absolute misery before that happens.
Should we have a quick word on the Border Force strikes, which start today until New Year's Eve? If people are watching and listening and they've got a flight booked, could they expect some disruption?
I don't think so. Now, I'm watching very carefully for Friday, the 30th of December. Is it still December?
It is still December. It feels funny time, doesn't it? Yeah. Betwixt us.
So that's going to be an absolute key date for all the people who spent Christmas, lucky them, somewhere sunny and lovely, coming back
Must
in.
Be nice, yeah.
And so I think if there is going to be any issues, it's going to be on that day, which is the last full day of the strike. It continues into New Year's Eve. But from what I saw at Gatwick on the 23rd, the military, the army, and plus the Navy and the Air Force are doing a pretty good job at what's a fairly mechanical task of having a look at your passport. Is that Simon? Yeah, is that his passport?
That you?
How old's that?
Well, I've still got an EU passport.
You use it a lot, don't you? Look.
Well, yeah. Anyway.
Look at all those stamps. Wow.
Well, my
Simon,
goodness.
I've got a specific question that might try and save a few quid for people out there, and that is people get used these days to using apps to book train tickets, but I'm hearing a lot of stories of tickets that you can book on an app that don't exist, or you're having difficulty getting refunds in that case. Is it safer at this time of year to book tickets directly with your carrier as opposed to using an app?
I always go through the app of the train company.
Yes.
And some of them, like, for example, LNER and Northern Trains, I find really good, really easy. And the great thing is, also of Anti-West Coast, the great thing is, if things go wrong, then with one click, you can say, yes, I'd like, my train was 2 hours late, I'd like a refund, please, and the money is in your account. Quite magical. So, yes, there are other apps, and some of them are very good in terms of technology, and they will also find these split ticket deals for you. Yeah. But generally, I always book direct, because that just minimises, when things are going to go tango uniform, as they say in the travel industry, then it's best to have a direct relationship with the train company.
Simon, do you know what I love about you is we can just throw anything at you.
Oh.
Yeah,
anything.
Yeah. No.
The man knows his stuff.
And you
know your onions.
And he never goes tango uniform.
Yeah, that's so true. Simon Calder, thank you so much.
Superb.
Now the time has just gone 14 minutes past 7. Let's bring you up to date with the latest stories making the news today.
4 people have been injured in a suspected gas explosion at a house in Worcestershire. Emergency services were called to the incident in Evesham last night shortly after 5 p.m. 3 of the injured were taken to hospital and 10 neighbouring properties were evacuated.
Labour is warning families that they're losing millions of pounds due to unsolved crimes. The party says more than 1 million thefts weren't solved last year, with cases dropped because police failed to find a suspect. Labour called the figures disgraceful. A Home Office spokesperson said the government is supporting the police through record investment and the recruitment of 20,000 additional officers by March 2023.
And the UK is facing ice and heavy rain with the potential of flooding in some areas. A yellow rain warning is in place for parts of the southwest England and South Wales until 3 p.m. today. Meanwhile, the Met Office has a yellow alert in place for snow and ice in the north and east of Scotland until 10 a.m. Well, welcome back. And lots of you have been sending your views on the stories we've been discussing this morning, Ellie.
Yeah, Paul says the mayor of Bristol was awful. He completely ignored what the majority of people wanted and only did what the woke wanted, which is what you were saying earlier, Martin. That's why the people of Bristol don't want or need a mayor. He was overpaid and a waste of time and money.
You can always rely on GB News viewers to be direct and say it as they see it.
Don't mince their words.
That's it. Kenneth says elected mayors can work well if there is proper local accountability and power without the added bureaucracy, but the mayor also needs to have real ability for the job, such as Andy Burnham or Andy Street in Manchester or Birmingham, of course.
Susie says, I've lived in Bristol for 67 years and having an elected mayor was not given anything positive, particularly with this present mayor. He's managed to enrage more people in Bristol than any local government politician ever has.
But apart from that, she likes him. And Michael says these strikes are causing so much disruption and inconvenience, it is shameful and irresponsible what is going on. Well, we're also asking for your New Year's resolutions and send in photographs of what you're up to in this Betwixtmas period. Nice little word I've learned today.
Well, I did get in trouble with Calvin Robinson yesterday. So it's not Betwixtmas, it's the third day of Christmas. Because there's 12 days of Christmas, obviously, so I have to repent now. But whatever it is, the fourth day of Christmas now or Betwixtmas, do let us know what you're getting up to, because it's a very funny time of year, or anything can happen, really. I know one of my friends is turning to a Bailey's coffee every morning at about 10 a.m. and you can at this time of year. Crazy things happen.
I think that's acceptable.
I'd love it if it was acceptable all year round.
Cool one during the break, Ellie.
Yeah, I should. Yeah, I've got enough going on here, haven't I? enough liquids. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Let us know what you're up to at this very funny time of year. Hopefully you're not getting a train, because you can't.
OK, now, the 8th of September 2022 is a day that will go down in history in the British memory. Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth II died peacefully at her summer retreat from Balmoral Castle.
Our royal reporter Cameron Walker looks back on that day and the events that followed.
The news that everyone was dreading happened. Buckingham Palace has announced that the Queen has died peacefully at Balmoral.
A day that is now etched in history.
Queen Elizabeth II was the rock on which modern Britain was built. Our country has grown and flourished under her reign. Britain is the great country it is today because of her.
Thousands gathered at royal residences to lay flowers and Paddington bears, a nod to Her late Majesty's surprise sketch at her Platinum Jubilee. Immediately, Charles ascended the throne and was formally proclaimed king at the Accession Council in St James's Palace. Politicians, past and present, united in grief despite their party differences.
He'd lost his mother on the Thursday. Here he was on the Saturday morning, standing in front of all of his Privy Councillors. They're his Privy Councillors now.
The King paid tributes to his beloved mother and renewed her pledge of lifelong service.
Hi everyone, thank you so much.
An olive branch from Prince William to his brother Prince Harry, when the siblings reunited to greet the public with their wives and view flowers outside Windsor. Any reconciling was short-lived. The Queen's coffin, accompanied by her daughter Princess Anne, was driven to St Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh to lie at rest. An opportunity for the people of Scotland to pay their last respects to the Queen of the United Kingdom. An RAF C-17 flew Her late Majesty back to London. The state hearse, specially designed for the public to see inside, drove down crowd-lined streets before one final night in Buckingham Palace. A well-rehearsed ceremonial procession brought the Queen to Westminster Hall so the public could pay their last respects as Her late Majesty lay in state.
People would queue for hours on end. They'd finally get in, and it would be 5 seconds, 6 seconds, and it just happened so beautifully and so peacefully.
The state gun carriage of the Royal Navy, pulled by 142 Royal Naval ratings, took Queen Elizabeth II's coffin to Westminster Abbey for the state funeral. At the King's request, the wreath on top of the coffin contained flowers from the gardens of Buckingham Palace, Clarence House and Highgrove. The royal family's dignity and stoicism shone through in the face of unimaginable grief. Princess Charlotte's choice of brooch, in the shape of a horseshoe, was gifted by her great-grandmother, the Queen. She, alongside her future king brother George, processed behind the coffin with their parents, the Prince and Princess of Wales. The state hearse to Windsor Castle for the committal service. More than 800 people, including the Queen's personal staff, filled St George's Chapel, in stark contrast to Prince Philip's funeral, where just 30 people could attend because of COVID restrictions. The imperial state crown, the orb and the sceptre were removed from the coffin and placed on the high altar. The King then placed the Queen's camp colour of the Grenadier Guards on the coffin. The wand broken, creating the symmetry with the 3 instruments of state being removed, ready to be passed on to their successor. The Queen was buried with her late husband Prince Philip in a private service in the King George VI Memorial Chapel. Back together for eternity. Cameron Walker, GB News.
You know, Eddie, sort of seeing those photographs, I think it's still sinking in about the Queen passing on.
Absolutely. I mean, I still can't believe it's happened. And I actually find it's getting worse when I see pictures of her, I guess. It's so sad. It really, really is. Just such a loss in 2022. And I think it will take us a long time to get over as British people.
Even like the King's speech, it still didn't, should be the Queen, it's still... These moments, I think, I guess we just have to get used to.
Yes, you're completely right.
That's life. But look, after the break, we'll be chatting with sports broadcaster Paul Coyte to get the latest update on all the football, so stay with us.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. The time has just gone 24 minutes past 7. Still lots to come on today's programme.
At 7:45, we're asking if it's healthy to be selfish.
What do you think?
I think a bit more me time is a good thing, because we try and just spread ourselves too thin, perhaps. And we'll be speaking to an expert who thinks that that is the right way to manage stress and avoid burning out.
At 8 o'clock on GB News, we're going to be live at Gatwick Airport to see if the Border Force strikes are affecting travel for holidaymakers, or perhaps not, if it's the same as what we saw before Christmas.
Well, Simon Cord was saying it was business as usual. Maybe the Border Force have overplayed their hands. Well, let us know if you've had any chaos or indeed encountered any magnificent army and servicemen who've whisked you on your way. No bother at all. The usual ways by email gbviews@gbnews or tweet us at gbnews. Well, in this betwixtmas period, there's one constant. It's the legend, Paul Coyte, going over all of the latest stories.
Selfless Paul Coyte as well, by the way. Just want to let you know.
Yeah, you're not doing very well.
Not doing this for myself.
You almost downed Ellie's Vapor Rub and Water.
Yes, I did. Yeah, it was the Vicks, and it was like, okay, a little sniff of that, and I thought, well, we've all got a bit of the lurgy, and I did nearly down it. So yeah, I've really set fire to things by just breathing. So well,
that might make your eyes water. I'm afraid, as a Nottingham Forest fan last night, Courtney, my eyes were watering.
Were they?
Somewhat, playing against a magnificent Man United squad. Got to be said.
Yeah.
Marcus Rashford back from the World Cup. He was on fire last night, and that pains me to admit. But he destroyed Nottingham Forest.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. See, now Manchester United, they're looking terrific, and I'll put my hands up and say that you know, when Erik ten Hag came in, I'm thinking this guy, it's not going to work. You know, this guy's coming in from Ajax. It's not going to work. It's just going to be another one on the list of ex-Manchester United managers, and he'll be on his way. But he really has. I mean, the Times said inspirational coaching and man management, which sums up the man to a T, and it is working. The players look happy. Look at Marcus Rashford. This is a player who he just lost his form so badly, and of course all the charity work you've been doing, and you've got to be very careful how you handle that by saying, look, you know, you need to concentrate maybe a little more on what you're supposed to be doing as far as football's concerned. But he now is, and he's playing fantastic, and it's also making Cristiano Ronaldo look a bit sillier as well, isn't it?
Kind of superfluous to requirements. Although it has to be said that it should have been 2-1 at half-time.
I thought you might say that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it should have been VAR. We don't need any more VAR. Any more transfer news? There's some movement going on.
Well, there's a few bits and pieces. There's a player called Cody Gakpo. Now, everybody's talking about Cody Gakpo, and he plays for Ajax, and he played in the World Cup for Holland. So Liverpool, who are very good. See, this is one thing when it comes to transfers. Liverpool, they get their deals done early. So they've got it done. It's like about 34 million we're talking. He came first in the Eredivisie in the Netherlands league for the goals scored, goals created, chances created. I mean, this kid is really some player. So whereas it was thought, could be going to Manchester United, Erik ten Hag, you know, the link again with Holland. Liverpool have come straight in. How much is it? We'll pay the money. There are some clubs that will wait until the last minute and then think, OK, we'll see if we can get a better deal. And that's one thing about Liverpool. They work out who their target's going to be, they buy them, and then it works out for them. So it's been very few bad signings that Liverpool have made. So it looks
can I quickly talk about the fact the World Cup seemed to be like a sort of recruitment process for Liverpool?
Yeah.
Especially, what about Bellingham? I mean, is he going to go anywhere?
I think he will. I don't know whether it'll be I don't think it'll be January. I think probably at the end of the season. But, I mean, this is someone that's going to be worth a fortune, 19 years old.
Yeah.
He will come back to the Premier League. Come to the Premier League, because he's never played in the Premier League. But he will find himself in the Premier League. When it's going to be, I imagine, probably in the summer, and then Borussia Dortmund are selling because, and again, we know it's going to be either Liverpool. But, you know, there's Jordan Henderson was with him at the World Cup and saying, you know, there's all these jokes about when you're coming to us and, you know, he'll end up either at Liverpool or Man City or Manchester United or Nottingham Forest, of course.
Well,
But by the way, Nottingham Forest, I mean, there's Steve Cooper has said, I think we want more signings. There were 22 signings during the summer. So it's like, we'll have a few more. I've now got to know these guys' names, so we'll get some more in.
He's already signed two entire squads.
Yes, yeah.
And we still can't get a goal. Well, we still got, Anyway.
Should we talk about women's football? Maybe best we move on. And Martin's not going to cry this morning. As we talk about Bethany England, and do you know what I love about Bethany England?
Yeah.
Is her surname is the same as the club that she plays for. It's handy, isn't it?
Well, the country she plays for.
Well, the country she plays for.
Because her middle name, would you believe, is Beth Tottenham Hotspur England. What are the chances? So she's going to sign for Spurs from Chelsea. She hasn't really got a look in. She was, I mean, she's a great player. She was in the Euros, but she didn't. She was in the squad, but she never actually made it to play. So she needs pretty much a restart, just a bit of a reboot of her career. She hasn't been getting in the first team as well. Chelsea, Spurs are also probably in that chasing pack when it comes to the WSL. But it just shows £250,000. This is going to be the biggest money signing that there's ever been between two English clubs. And again, it just shows the rise of the WSL in women's football because it's big money that clubs are now paying. So 250 grand.
What's the average that they'd pay for women? Because 250,000 doesn't sound like a lot.
It doesn't sound.
It's a big signing.
It is. I mean, it doesn't sound like a lot compared to when you talk about men that are playing for 36, 40 million or whatever. But things are moving up. I remember speaking to some of the girls that were playing in the Spurs team. This is we're probably looking back about 6 or 7 years. And I remember them saying, it's so difficult because we've got to buy our own tracksuits. It's, we've got to so much and we've got to keep jobs going. Whereas now, as we know, it's just gone like a rocket. And it's continuing to build. Money's going up, so long may that continue.
Now Corty, I do need a little bit of hope in the new year.
I'm not the man to help you. I'm not the man.
Looking at the bottom end of the table.
Yeah.
Do you think Forest can avoid the chop? There's a lot of big clubs in trouble, and Wolves are in trouble. Yeah. Everton are wobbling badly.
They are.
Is Lampard's star on the wane at Everton, do you think?
I think, yes. I mean, poor Frank Lampard, went in at Chelsea. I mean, as far as managerial goes with Frank Lampard, Derby was where he started. It went very well, but he brought a lot of loans in from Chelsea. So then the big job, which was the ultimate job for him, which, you'd think probably came too soon, was Chelsea. That didn't work out. Then to Everton. And now you've got to start thinking, now, what happens to Frank Lampard now, should he get the sack from Everton? Because the way things are going, and then losing a last-minute goal against Wolves, it doesn't look very good for Frank. No, and, is he going to get another Premier League job? There's always going to be TV punditry, which is always going to be there for him.
Be after your job, Paul.
I think there's a very strong possibility, but I have been spoken to by Everton to take over there, so we could do a little job swap.
Job swap, yeah. And we've just got time for you to tell us about a cricket incident.
Yes, it's quite a nasty incident, although I did find it quite amusing. Anrik Nokia, who's a fine South African bowler. Hopefully we can find footage of this. If not, we may need to recreate it with Martin. Is that that spider cam that they use? They use it in all sports, and it's on like 4 wires, and it can go anywhere, and it goes all over the pitch. He got hit by this, so this is during a game, and there'd been players that complained about it before because the thing, it moves down and moves around. So anyway, he's standing in the field, bang. He gets knocked over, and he's looked around, well, what on earth was that? Well, he could find out because the footage is there, and he got hit by one of the spider cams. So he got an injury there to his shoulder. This is a great bowler. I think he's OK.
That's going to hurt.
But it is going to hurt because these are big things that come down. So he's OK, though. He's bowling this morning. This is in Australia against South Africa.
Make sure you don't get taken out by a camera on your way out.
I will try my... Is that a warning? It is. It's a failed warning. I don't know why you said that.
Veiled threat.
I'll just have this black eye as I come back in.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you.
Paul Court, always a pleasure, never a chore, apart from when you don't give me any hope, Matt.
Anyway, you'll be fine.
So after the break, we'll be discussing and debating the biggest stories in today's papers with our panel of guests. See you in a couple of minutes.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, We're
on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8". My instincts was to sort of cover this up. Clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. The time is 7:35. Let's bring you up to date with the stories making the front pages of the papers today.
And the Eye covers the escalating train strikes, with thousands to be balloted again under a new tactic to increase the number of walkouts across the network.
The Mail has an exclusive. Union barons have launched a loyalty card scheme for strikers, designed, it claims, to artificially swell picket line numbers.
And the Telegraph says the Royal Military Academy at Sandhurst is today urged to tackle an allegedly toxic culture of sexual assault embedded within the institution.
The Express says thousands of vulnerable cancer patients are being stranded in isolation without support during the cost of living crisis.
And The Guardian says hundreds of voluntary organisations have been forced to shut or scale back because of government operations, because of delay in replacing EU funding. They're blaming Brexit, basically, The Guardian, once again.
Well, it's time to go through the papers now, and joining us this morning for the second time today is political editor of Sunday People, Nigel Nelson, and former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall. Real-life married couples, so it's been fireworks here this morning. Differing political opinions, which makes for great telly, I must say. Nigel, let's start with you, shall we, and the Mail. This is about Keir Starmer and the trans issue. It's an issue that won't go away.
It won't go away, I'm afraid, this one. Yes, and this is the women's rights campaigner, Julie Bindel, who says unless Keir Starmer changes tack on this, broadly to actually say, look, we want to clamp down on trans women using safe spaces for other women, she won't vote Labour again. She can't support them. She's been a lifelong Labour supporter. The problem here is, I think that you start from the point. Do you think it is a basic human right to be able to choose your gender? If you do, should it not be as easy as possible to do it? And then you've got to sort out the problems of things like safe spaces, women's changing rooms in shops, women's loos, where people go. Schools are doing this all the time, that they've got trans pupils, and if there is a problem with a trans pupil using, say, a girls' changing room, and I was hearing over the weekend of just such a problem, then they create their own trans spaces. Now, it may well be we as a society have to think about doing that kind of thing.
Yeah, the thing that gets me about this, Claire, so I've known Julie for years, so I used to edit a men's magazine, had lots of quality articles in it, called Loaded, and Julie Bindel was staunchly opposed to what we did, and yet now, common sense people agree with you. I agree with Julie on this, because really, if Keir Starmer can't say what a woman is when asked, if he says people with cervixes, if he says chest feeding, surely this is outright misogyny.
It absolutely is. Tens of millions of women just want to be referred to as a woman. They want to have that biological sex taken as something that is real and is something that is important. And I think this is the trap that Keir Starmer has unfortunately fallen into. He's given into those bullies in the trans space, which unfortunately tend to be the loudest voices, who will be the first ones out there to say you're a transphobe because you have a different opinion. And unfortunately, Keir Starmer has not stood up for them, has not stood up to them. So millions of women, and like Julie Bindel, I do agree with her on this, that they are letting down, the Labour Party are letting down those tens of millions of women who will not vote again because he cannot answer a simple question as to what is a woman.
Do you think that 2023 might be the year of common sense? But it's for both of you on this issue, because we've seen pushback against Stonewall, Tavistock Clinic, Mermaids. It does seem that people are pushing back.
Well, I'm not sure Claire was talking common sense a second ago, so on this particular one, you start from the principle, can we accept that some people feel uncomfortable in the biological sex they have and want to change their gender? And if they do, let's sort out the problems along the way, not say they can't do it or a trans woman is not a woman.
By allowing those people into women's spaces where they're vulnerable, domestic violence centres, and that's what Julie Bindel has campaigned on with J.K. Rowling.
Yep.
They opened a women's-only space in Edinburgh where victims of domestic violence and sexual assault, women are allowed to go to be away from men. That would strike me as a basic human right, and they're being called transphobic for that.
Well, I mean, I don't think they are transphobic. This is my point about what we have to do along the way. It's a bit like same-sex relationship legislation. It took a while to actually sort out the various anomalies in the law. And so in a situation like this, what I'm talking about is let's get these kind of anomalies sorted out as we go along.
OK, well, let's move on to another of my favourite people now, Sadiq Khan. Claire, his latest plan in the war on motorists. It's claimed in the Telegraph today it's destroying London, but this is not just a London issue, is it?
It's not just a London issue, and this is highlighted very nicely by Gareth Bacon, who is the MP for Orpington, which is Greater London.
Yeah.
And he is highlighting the fact that the Sadiq Khan's team are going to sell this as a tax on the wealthy, and this is going to improve air quality in central.
Being expanded, is it?
It's the ultra-low emission zone being expanded. So it's an extra £12.50 per day charge to drive through the zone. Gareth Bacon's argument is that it doesn't affect the wealthy. This actually affects the lowest income households. 50% of outer London households who earn around about £10,000 own a car. Yeah. They tend to be older cars, but they are dependent upon them. And that increases up to 70% for those households earning $20,000. So these aren't your highest earners. These are people going around their everyday lives trying to get on. And if we look at all of the problems that we've had with strikes, you cannot get a train. And I think what Sadiq Khan is failing to understand is that everywhere is not like Islington.
Yeah.
Nigel should also agree with this, considering that we live in quite a rural area, which doesn't have very many bus services, if any, a very poor train service, and we rely upon a car. And all we have to do is drive 10 miles towards Dartford and across that border into Greater London, and we would be charged £12.50.
Yeah, Nigel, it's worth picking up on the fact that a lot of bad ideas start in London. This is taxation dressed as salvation. And it will be going. It's already in Manchester. It's in Birmingham. It's been proposed in Bradford. It's been proposed in Oxford. This isn't just a London-centric thing that we should be bothered about down here. This is coming to a town near you, and it's going to hammer the poorest motorists hardest, isn't it?
Yes. Well, I mean, it's going to hammer every motorist. The question comes down to whether or not we really want to try and reach net zero by 2050. And if we do, there's a lot of sacrifices have to be made along the way. Now, I appreciate there's some research by TfL for this particular scheme that it may not help air quality that much. But the whole aim of these things is to do just that. So my view is we should be going for net zero, going hell for leather for net zero, and schemes like this we're going to have to accept. It's going to be uncomfortable for all of us.
But what if if net zero makes people net poorer and net colder? I mean, that's what's happening, Claire.
But it is, and I don't agree that this is anything to do with net zero and all of those very laudable aims, which I fundamentally disagree with, because I do think you're right. I think it does make people poorer. I think this whole push towards net zero is just very expensive, very ill thought through, and isn't going to work. But I think the real crux of the issue here is it's going to do very little for air quality, but an awful lot to prop up a failing administration by taking in fines from people who can least afford it. And that seems to be what Sadiq is doing, trying to balance his own budget, taking money from motorists.
Yeah. And the context, I think, of this is important, because in a cost of living crisis, I mean, anecdotally, I was getting a taxi the other day, and the taxi driver was telling me that he couldn't afford to buy a new car next year with everything else going up, and energy bills and his mortgage and everything. And he's going to have to look for a new job. He cannot afford a new car and to drive through the ULEZ zone. So it's going to be difficult for people who rely on cars for work. And it is people like who drive a white van, you know, who don't have a choice but to drive.
The working classes have been the hardest by it.
Exactly. Okay. Nigel, let's stick to a motoring story, shall we? And 50 drivers a day are caught still using their phones behind the wheel.
I'm sure this is one we could all agree on. This is absolutely disgraceful. The figures show that it's gone up 10% since last year. Quite clearly, it's irresponsible, and dangerous. And in fact, just to rub the point home, that the Mail mention a 2-week-old baby who was killed by a motorist using a mobile phone, an off-duty police sergeant on her bicycle who was knocked off and killed, again in the same way. Quite clearly, you should not use your mobile when you are driving. The penalties actually are quite high, so you get £200 fine, 6 points on your licence, so if you do it twice, then you're off the road. Maybe we should think about a ban a bit earlier.
Yeah, but there are cases if your phone is in a kind of holder and you have to tap.
I think they're not talking about this. You know, they're talking about the handheld.
Holding it in your hand is when you're in trouble. You're okay to tap away on your ways.
Which should be fine. That should be fine. It's in the hand,
OK, good. Moving on, Claire, to the story I mentioned at the top of the hour there. The Guardian is having a moan about Brexit. Some things are constant.
They are. Some things really are constant, and The Guardian and Brexit are always going to be up there. And this highlights charities who were reliant upon EU funding are having problems because the government hasn't rolled out the replacement scheme, which is the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. The government hasn't rolled it out quicker. So I like to disagree with The Guardian pretty much every single time I read it, and I think this is less of a Brexit problem, this is more of a government administration problem. And all it is the government needs to get its act together and actually put that money to the places that it needs to do that. Charities should not have to be shutting down and shedding staff because the government cannot put out a scheme which is there to do exactly that.
Another area it mentions there is farming.
It does,
and those of us who campaigned hard for Brexit always said those grants that the farmers get in Britain from the EU should be replaced by central government in Britain.
And I don't think anybody would disagree with that. And the money is there, and that's the really frustrating part of it, is the money is already there, and it is almost allocated out into individual pots. But it just hasn't been given out. And you've got to look at this. This isn't a Brexit problem. I think that that's a very lazy headline from The Guardian. This is a government
Nigel
problem.
disagrees. Is it a Brexit problem?
No, in fact, actually, Claire and myself disagree fundamentally over Brexit. She's a Brexiteer, I'm a Remainer. However, no, I do agree with Claire on this one. It's not a Brexit problem. This was already allocated. This was money sorted out to actually sort out what would happen when we lost the EU regional funds. It should be paid.
I think you guys are agreeing way too much on this show.
We'll go away again and have another fight.
During half-time, come back on battle stations. But, Ellie, there's a story that you want to cover.
I do. We've got 1 minute, and let's just have a little bit of fun with this one. And it's about the Order of the Porky Blinders. Tell us about this. It's in the Star.
These are villagers in Silloth, near Carlisle in Cumbria, and the villagers are living in fear of a gang of wild pigs out on the loose. They're not sure where they've come from, but they are described as destructive and willful, solid, fast and strong. I mean, these are the ultimate predators roaming around in a dark village, people walking their dogs, coming across some random pigs. The RSPCA have actually located where they're from and have put them back and secured the fencing.
Well, they're hardly wild boars, are they?
A gang of runaway pigs.
Runaway pigs.
Dangerous time to be a porky playing. You're a walking pork pie. Watch out.
Right, Nigel, Claire, thank you so much.
Splendid fun, cheers. OK, we want to know all about your New Year's resolution. Send us pictures, let us know what you're up to.
Yes, Lee has been in touch. Says, my New Year's resolution is to finish my driving lessons and get driving. Good luck, because they've been on strike this week, haven't they? So maybe that's a good one for 2023. Let's hope that gets sorted. He says, with the state that this country is in, we can no longer rely on a train service being run properly. I've worked it out that it's also cheaper than catching the train. With the cost of rail prices in the UK, they are extortionate.
And that's what we were talking about earlier.
Exactly
I do think these train strikes will backfire and put more motorists back behind their wheels because they can depend on it, even though the government wants to wage war on their cars.
It's only getting more expensive as well, isn't it?
Too right.
Up 5.9%, I think.
OK, Martin, not me, on the strikes. Richard says, my view is that if train workers, border force workers or nurses don't want to work because they want more pay, then they should just leave their jobs and go and find other work instead.
And on the elected mayor for the North East, Keith says, I think that regional mayors are just another level of very expensive bureaucracy, which the council taxpayer could well do without.
Got to say, I tend to agree.
Well, do keep those views coming in. gbviews@gbnews.uk. We do love to hear from you.
We do. OK, you might think selfishness is a negative trait, but experts have revealed that living selfishly could actually help you function at your very best.
Yes, healthy selfishness is what they're calling it, and it means putting yourself first and setting boundaries in order to prevent getting burnt out and overstressed by the pressures of life, which can be especially important at this time of year.
Betwixtmas. So let's find out more about that from priority therapist Deborah Longsdale. So, Deborah, we always hear that being selfish is a bad thing. You're saying it can be useful. Tell us more.
Good morning. I mean, it's a really complex word, isn't it? And often we misunderstand that actual word. But it's all about thinking about your own well-being and about your own ability to manage your own mental health. Mental health has a huge link with physical health as well. So often people that are not managing their own commitments to maybe themselves and their families and their work commitments can then feel quite a lot of physical ailments as well that come through.
Case of we simply give too much time to other people and we don't focus on ourselves, and how can that manifest itself in terms of our own problems? We just get run down, we get tired, we get ill even.
Absolutely. I mean, we just keep on going, don't we? Life is very demanding. It depends on what stage of life you're at. If you've got children, if you're working, if you've got elder relations, maybe older people in your family that you're also looking after. And then we have all the pressures of the perfect Christmas or the perfect New Year's Eve. And we just keep going. And actually, if we just keep going and don't stop and don't recharge and don't reboot, then our brains will start to burn out, and then we have memory loss. We may have we get very snappy with our loved ones. Maybe we have less patience. People can then feel lots of aches and pains. They can't quite understand and don't really know what's going on. Get down to their doctor. Know what's going on physically as well, perhaps. So it can really manifest itself in so many very different ways.
And part of the issue, Deborah, is that so many of us are just so bad at saying no. So you'd be asked to run here and go see that relative, or can you, bake something for tomorrow? And yes, yes, yes. And you'd say yes to everything. And you wouldn't think about yourself and what you need. So what would you say is the best way to set those boundaries and perhaps say no, but in a polite way?
Yeah, I love that you've used that word. So as a therapist, boundaries is a word that we use quite a lot. And again, it's helpful for people to understand what that actually means. It doesn't mean that you turn into the Grinch and you say no all the time and you become really unhappy and really unpopular, if you like, with your friends. It's about thinking, can I do that? Do I want to do that? What would that look like for me? What's the impact on me or my immediate needs or my family, perhaps? And thinking how you can maybe find that middle ground, but thinking about your own needs. So maybe if you've got a really big gathering, do I really want to go? Can I make that? Are there any financial issues or time issues that I need to think about? And can I go a bit later? Can I go a bit earlier? Do I need to think about finding that middle ground so I protect myself, but also support the things that I want to be involved in?
So what are the best ways of being selfish? What simple things like just going for a nice walk on your own, switching your phone off, or I quite like going to the pub on my own.
Oh, do you?
Which could call me sad, but you could read a newspaper. You don't have to bother about conversation and small talk. Just decompress. Yeah. Have a bit of time to yourself.
Yeah, it's all about understanding what you need. I mean, we're all slightly different people and therefore have different needs and different energy levels. So something like journaling can be really helpful, where you maybe make a note of what it is that you find really useful to do. How do you recharge? I mean, some people recharge by being with other people, and that's fine. But like you say, you can go for a walk. Even just a 20-minute walk can have a huge benefit for people. There's an app that we have in Priory called My Possible Self, which is a free app to download, and there's lots of really helpful tips and options in there to help people learn about what it is that I need. How does my anxiety or my depression manifest itself? Are there things I can be more boundaried with? How can I learn about what I need and how I can use that in my everyday life?
Super, that's great tips there, Deborah Longsdale. Thank you for your time. And sometimes it's all about me. That's not a bad thing. Thank you for your input today.
And it's okay to say no. Yep, good thing to remember. You're with Breakfast on GB News. Still lots more to come.
Britain's house price has been on a roller coaster of highs and lows over the last few years. We'll be asking a property expert if the buy-to-let market has a future. But first, let's take a look at the weather.
The UK is looking wet and windy for some, with the driest weather in the north. Heavy rain will affect southwest England through this morning, bringing a risk of flooding and potential travel disruption. A mild but windy start to the day, with coastal gales likely. Rain will affect London and southeast England this morning. It'll be mostly light, but there will be some heavy bursts too, becoming increasingly windy. It'll be a wet and blustery start for southern Wales, with spells of heavy rain that could cause delays to transport this morning. Across the Midlands, rain will spread northeastwards through this morning, with some heavy bursts expected at times. It will be a mild but increasingly windy day, especially to the lee of higher ground. It will be a dry and generally cloudy start to today across northeast England. Rain will start to move in from the southwest through this morning, with some heavy spells at times, becoming windy. A dry but icy start across southern Scotland this morning, with some clear spells. Rain will move into the far south towards midday, though this will be mostly light at first. A band of rain will spread northeastwards across Northern Ireland through this morning, with some heavy bursts expected, becoming breezy towards midday, especially around northern and eastern coasts. Rain will continue northeastwards, with strong winds becoming widespread, and showers will follow this evening, some of which will be heavy. And that is how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel. Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
it's 8 o'clock on Wednesday, the 28th of December. This is Breakfast on GB News with Ellie Costello and Martin Daubney. Here's what's leading the news this morning.
Members of the armed forces have stepped up at airports across the UK as Border Force staff strike yet again. We'll be live at Gatwick Airport to see if it's having the disruptive effect the union is hoping for.
Plus, after 3 years of highs and lows in the housing market because of the pandemic and the cost of living, many landlords are selling up and moving on. Are we set to say bye-bye to the buy-to-let market?
And in the year we lost Her Majesty the Queen, our royal correspondent reflects on the events of the 8th of September 2022 and a nation in mourning.
And you can join in any of our discussions this morning by emailing gbnews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at gbnews.
Well, as just discussed, Border Force staff are striking for another 4 days today at airports across Britain and the port of Newhaven.
Yes, the strike could mean delays at the border, and it comes as a wave of other strikes have rattled public services this month. Well, let's find out more from our reporter Theo Chukumba, who is at Gatwick Airport this morning. Good morning to you, Theo. Oh no, it's lashing it down with rain. How is it looking in terms of the Border Force strike that started again today? Does it look like there's some disruption?
Good morning. Yes, it's wet and windy here at Gatwick Airport. Now, these strikes, they are resuming today. There were some last week, but airport bosses say the traffic inside the airport was free-flowing, so they're hoping for that again as walkouts continue today. So it's affecting the major airports in the UK, including here at Gatwick, but also at Newhaven in the south of England, where people can take ferries to places like France and more. Now, we heard from Mark Sawatka, who's the General Secretary of the PCS Union, and he was saying they have a mandate to continue walking out for the next 6 months if a deal isn't reached. Staff have been offered 2% pay rise, so it's a difficult time for them. They say this isn't the deal that we want, considering a cost of living crisis that we're having at the moment. Around 12,000 members of the PCS Union, the union which represents civil servants, they said the biggest thing for them is the cost of living at the moment. So that's why they're still walking out. And again, we find ourselves here today. Passengers may be having delays again. We'll find out throughout the day today. So people going into the airport and those coming out as well, travelling from other parts of the world and of course the country as well.
Thank you for bringing us that update for a very wet and windy Gatwick Airport. We'll let him go in and get dry. I hope he find himself a cup of tea or something.
Was that the wind or was that a jet taking off next to
I think it was a combination, actually. There was definitely a jet in there somewhere, but yeah, not the weather to be standing outside, is it
He's
today?
definitely not on strike anyway. OK, so servicemen and women are being deployed to help alleviate the strain caused by the Border Force strike action we saw just there.
Yes, the Home Office has denied union claims that passengers who might otherwise be stopped at airports are being waved through by military personnel standing in for striking workers.
And the Army have also been successful so far in helping with disruption from ambulance and NHS strikes throughout December. Well, can we expect the same at our airports today?
Well, we have Robert Fox with us in the studio, the defence editor at the Evening Standard, to tell us more. And Robert, it really has been extraordinary scenes, hasn't it, in the past few weeks? Similar to what we saw in COVID, really, our armed forces just stepping up, stepping in and keeping Britain moving. How do they feel about this, though? How do they feel about stepping in for our border force?
They do it because they turn to the right, salute and carry out orders. And they are pretty good at it. They're pretty good at it in the way that both the senior public servants, civil servants, and some politicians, and of no particular political party or stripe, can be pretty grudging about it. Even, you know, Matt Hancock was pretty mealy-mouthed because, of course, he miraculously could have resolved everything with COVID. Sorry, I shouldn't be sarcastic at this hour in the morning. And there's no doubt about it that some civil servants really didn't like the army stepping in. Now, there's one exception. Kate Bingham, with the vaccination programme, said how brilliant the army, or the combined across the week, they're particularly good at logistical planning in emergency. But what the public is finding again, it's what happened with the Olympics, and Mrs May, who was Home Secretary, again, was very grudging about it, was that they stepped in when G4S stepped down initially, did a lot of training, and they said you had paras checking baggages and things like that. Absolutely charmed the pants, almost literally, off everybody going through. And I understand much the same is happening with the border force solution. What the army and the army commanders quite rightly say, look, we're not the immediate band-aid. This is not a permanent feature of our world. You can use civil powers legislation and we can come in to help, but be very careful about it. And by the way, if they're going to do this a lot, they've got to pay a lot more for the army across the piece, particularly the reserves.
Yes, because I mean, some people. Sorry, Martin. Some soldiers that we're talking about here are on as little as £22,000, and they're stepping in for striking workers who might be on 2-3 times that. I mean, like you say, that they do it in the line of duty, and they do it because they're good at what they do. But that's quite a bitter pill to swallow. It must be, especially at this time of year.
Yes, yes, they don't like it, and they don't think that they're the equivalent or an immediate substitute for people like ambulance drivers, whom they respect. But this is where General Sanders, Patrick Sanders, very, very EQ, hands-on, people-friendly commander of the army at the moment, and his predecessor, Mark Carleton-Smith, were actually saying to the government, and the government say, no, 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 we cannot go below 100,000. They say we can mix and match. Yes, let's have 80,000 regulars, 20,000 reserves, but to make the reserves work, and it's very important this, because their expertise in niche areas is very often needed, you've got to pay for it.
Yeah.
This is where government, and particularly the Treasury, falls apart.
Well, they've certainly been very effective. Simon Calder, our travel guru, said the border force strike is the least effective strike he's ever seen. Yeah. And he's covered a lot of strikes because the armed forces guys have been so good at the airports. Robert, I'd like to put something else to you, something that the GB News viewers talk about a lot, and that is using more of our armed forces in the Channel. We have a situation which is a huge issue of illegal immigration with the illegal boats. And people might say, send in the Navy, send in the Army. But is that possible? And do the armed forces, men and women, even want to do that?
Yes, in the short term, it's possible. Yeah. No, they don't like. They really don't like doing it.
Right.
Because, well, the Navy knows the law of the sea and the law of passage on the sea and the humanitarian aspect to that, and they wonder whether it is their prime role. The Navy's quite small and it's quite stretched. And I think it points to a thing that, we have discussed a lot on GB News, is that really this question of managing migrants, illegal migrants, whether on the sea, in trucks, in goodness knows what, it really needs a holistic approach. And you probably need, I know that they've looked at it, but haven't come up with a satisfactory answer yet. You need a dedicated force for this. I really do think that. And of course, where the Home Secretary is absolutely right, it needs maximum cooperation with not only the French authorities and their forces, but also the Belgians, the Dutch, and so on. And it's a massive problem, and it's not going away. And I think that we've got to, yes, temporary solution, bringing in the Navy and so on. They don't actually have the right equipment either for this, the right sort of small boats. Look at what the Italian Coast Guard service has had to learn in the Mediterranean. There's been a huge learning curve there. And I think we're all going to go through it. But I think it should be a joint force. And probably it's appalling to say it because it's a fighting and defensive force. The best management would be NATO, rather than if it's a UK-EU cooperation. Well, I don't have to spell it out. It could be extremely edgy. Can I put it like that? Yeah.
It certainly is a very, very difficult situation. On the programme yesterday, we were talking about 46,000 migrants coming over so far this year. There were fears it was going to be 50,000. Yeah. It doesn't look like that's going to happen in the next how many days we've got.
Will be next year.
But it will, certainly in the first few months of next year it will. Let's talk about the border force strike that's happening today through to New Year's Eve. So we've seen this previous to Christmas for the days there, and it was very smooth sailing. But there were some concerns, weren't there, that the soldiers, the personnel, the armed forces that were on the passport control were just simply waving people through. Now, the Home Office has said today that isn't the case, that they're completely denied those claims. What's your sense of what was going on the ground? I mean, how much training had these armed forces soldiers and personnel had before they were on passport control?
There would have been some. There would have been contingency for this. But to say that it's a perfect replica would be absolutely wrong.
Right.
That they know that they can't do that. I fear, and quite correctly though, that the objective would be to keep things flowing, so you don't want bottlenecks, as our colleague was telling us from Gatwick now. And so I think that it would be selective. The point is how long can this go on for? Because if the strikes go on, you're going to consume an awful lot of, I was about to say manpower, forgive me, I was showing my age, but a lot of it's woman power and manpower. And the women personnel are particularly good at this, they're particularly empathetic. But we are committed, lest we forget it, to Ukraine, and a lot of our armed forces behind the scenes, of course not in Ukraine, are dedicated to that. They're worried about other things that are going on in the world. I think the numbers are staggering. I think we've got military personnel, maybe a squad of only 20, in nearly 90 countries, certainly over 80, and it's a big business. I mean, this is global Britain. It's Britain with global interests and global reach,
and it's also Britain at its very best.
Yeah,
cometh the hour once again. The armed forces have stepped up and done a magnificent job. Do you think, Robert, this is the best way of putting yourself forward for a pay rise? I mean, they're going about their job with duty, with patriotism. They're not complaining. They're not standing away. They're not going on to picket line. They're stepping in and helping us. So surely the public sympathy, I think, will be very, very much behind an armed forces pay rise in the face of this.
Well, there's a problem here, as you know, because both Boris Johnson and Liz Truss promised an uptick in the defence budget. Mr. Sunak seems to be going in the opposite direction. He seems to be freezing defence spending, which is understandable, and rather reminds me of Oscar Wilde asking about the cost of everything. You remember what a cynic was, according to Oscar? Somebody who knows the price of everything and the value of nothing. Sorry, I'm not saying that about our dear Prime Minister. But come on, you know, they do produce a lot of added value. I must say I've worked alongside them for a lot of my working life, and we won't go into all that before the Falklands, Northern Ireland and so on. I mean, the Northern Ireland experience with the armed services, very few armed services would have gone through that 30, 40-year experience and come out with such little, whatever they say, there were terrible episodes, of course, like Bloody Sunday, but relatively little blemish on the record. It's a very, very difficult job. They're very good with people. Our armed forces, I don't know why they have it, but they have it.
One of the great underutilised resources I think we have in Britain are our armed services veterans.
Yeah.
And surely we're seeing at the moment, you know, that the perfect skill set that veterans have could be redeployed, retrained, utilised. In these areas, there's a huge demand for skilled, dedicated people who don't down tools at the first sign of a pay cut. Get some more veterans in.
Look, this is the season of goodwill, so I'm not going to quarrel with you, Andrew, but during COVID, it was things like the regimental associations, the veterans associations of the other two, the light blue and the dark blue, the RAF and the Navy. Gosh, in the North in particular, what these veterans associations, you'd get something of the Yorkshire regiments. They would turn people out, and it's the management of those. They are a terrific resource. They're also hidden, not quite Cinderella force, because they did do an awful lot, and they will be an important feature in the future. If you take, you've generally forgotten what, we're a country of 65 million. We've got a military family of over 5 million. Let me think, that's people who've served, people who have loved ones, or best friends, best buddies who've served and who've impressed people with that. And there are, I'm not dissing the government, because the Veterans Minister, for example, Johnny Mercer, who served with great gallantry in Afghanistan, completely gets this. But it is a resource without banging the drum, sorry, pardon the pun, too much. We really should be utilising more, and they do have this great professionalism that there's this thing that was called Rubicon, it's now called React. I've worked a bit with them. They're terrific in floods, for instance.
Yeah.
When culverts are bursting, when villages are being flooded, you know, when grannies and grandpas are being flooded out with sewage and so on, they're great at just turning up and coming to do it for 2 or 3 weeks unpaid.
Well,
totally unpaid.
On that, we can read Robert Fox, defence editor of the Evening Standard. Thank you very much. And again, just thanks for your service. You know, all of our armed servicemen and women out there who've been helping at the borders. When we need them most, you're there. So thank you for stepping in.
Yeah, like you say, best of British. But how do they feel about it, the armed forces? Could be quite cheesed off, couldn't you? It's not what you signed up for. Let us know what you think. How do you feel about seeing our armed forces at Border Force or passport control? Let us know. gbviews@gbnews.uk.
OK, well, it's 8:15 and let's bring you up to date with the other stories making the headlines this morning.
4 people have been injured in a suspected gas explosion at a house in Worcestershire. Emergency services were called to the incident in Evesham last night, shortly after 5 p.m. 3 of the injured were taken to hospital and 10 neighbouring properties were evacuated.
And the Labour Party is warning families are losing millions of pounds due to unsolved crimes. The party says more than 1 million thefts weren't solved last year, with cases dropped because police failed to find a suspect. Labour called the figures disgraceful, while a Home Office spokesperson said the government is supporting the police for a record investment and the recruitment of 20,000 additional officers by March 2023.
The UK is facing ice and heavy rain with the potential of flooding in some areas. A yellow rain warning is in place for parts of southwest England and South Wales until 3 o'clock today. Meanwhile, the Met Office has a yellow alert in place for snow and ice in the north and east of Scotland until 10 a.m.
Well, welcome back. Anna's been saying all morning, we want to know what your New Year's resolutions are today.
Yes, Clive's been in touch. Good morning to you, Clive. He says, my garage is so untidy, I can't find anything. So my resolution is to tidy my man cave /workshop. Have you got a man cave?
Yeah, if you saw the state of my basement, I mean, it's an absolute disgrace. I've never owned a garage. I just crave a garage. That is a life goal. Like a bench, motorbikes, jukebox, fridge, posters, lock on the door.
A real setup.
My idea of heaven.
Maybe
anyway.
that could be a resolution for you. Get yourself a man cave in 2023.
On being selfish, John says, I get up to 2 hours. I get up 2 hours before everybody else every day and I watch my Discovery programme so not to bore my children to death. And it's 2 hours of me time to relax and have a cup of coffee. Good idea.
And what were we calling it? It was good selfishness or positive...
healthy selfishness.
Healthy selfishness, that's it. And that's what we should be doing more of, apparently. You're allowed to say no, is the message this morning. On devolution, Paddy says, forget regional mayors. England needs its own parliament or assembly like the rest of the UK nations. The UK government doesn't necessarily speak for all of England.
Very interesting point. We have a Welsh Parliament, of course, Scottish Parliament, and we have Ireland, but not England. But, of course, if you say that, you're an English nationalist, and that's the worst kind of nationalist, apparently, Ellen.
Well, let us know what you think about that. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, as the year draws to a close, Birmingham is reflecting on its time hosting the Commonwealth Games. The city is reportedly now drawing up plans to turn it into a sports hub.
The conversation is turned into how the city and local sporting organisations can build a legacy over the coming year and how young people can be positively impacted in the community.
Our West Midlands reporter Jack Carson has this report.
2022 has been a huge year for Birmingham. As host to one of the biggest sporting events in the world, billions of people tuned into the Commonwealth Games taking place here in the West Midlands. This month, the official thank you event has been held to mark the end of the year of the Games and reflect on what Council leader Ian Ward believes was a hugely successful summer.
5 million people came into the city during the Commonwealth Games. 5 times the population of the city came to our city to be part of that global event. It was a huge, huge success. I've never seen an atmosphere in the city of Birmingham like the one we had during the Games this summer. And the Commonwealth Games federations were kind enough to say to us that it wasn't just a Commonwealth Games, it was the best ever Commonwealth Games.
Also at the ceremony was the handing over of the Queen's baton, which will be displayed in the city. Now this part of the West Midlands turns its attention to how to build a games legacy. For Birmingham City Council, that starts in the community.
Well, we're investing now in grassroots community sport, grassroots community culture as a legacy from the Games. We're also creating a cultural festival. There will be an annual event here in the city centre, but we'll look to connect out all of our communities into that festival in the same way as we did with the Commonwealth Games.
Along with investment from the council, Sport England are providing £35 million worth of combined National Lottery and government funding to ensure the effect of Birmingham 2022 is felt for people across the city and the country as well. Chief Executive Tim Hollingsworth says it's about giving young people access to sport.
Well, I think the most important thing for sport now, particularly coming out of the Birmingham Games, is to understand that we do not have equal access and opportunity to playing sport and being physically active. There are significant barriers to entry and some very stubborn inequalities, actually. The ambition is to enable people locally, regionally, and indeed ultimately nationally to have more activity in their lives, to feel the benefit of that for their physical, mental health and well-being, their sense of community, and perhaps most of all, to have ensured that those who previously felt more excluded, less engaged by sport, have had the chance because of the programmes that we've run.
One community project receiving funding is the Impact Fitness Academy, a group in Birmingham trying to make a difference to people's lives through combat sports such as freestyle wrestling and boxing. Assistant coach Hanaya Kusar stresses the importance of that money for projects like this.
It's helped us build our business and start to get more equipment and allow us to increase our class numbers so that we can reach wider community areas.
The next Commonwealth Games are to be held in Victoria, Australia in 2026, and there'll be expectations for them to put on a show like Birmingham did. In the meantime, this city is starting to build its legacy and keep that Games spirit alive. Jack Carson, GB News.
Really interesting, actually. We've just had somebody tweet me in response to that story we're just talking about with the border force strikes and our armed forces coming in to cover that. Paul Emery has been in touch on Twitter saying being stuck in barracks doing camp and guard duties is a tedious affair for military personnel. The strikes do allow them to be operational in some capacity. His Majesty's forces are the best in the world.
Oh, hear to that, Paul. Thanks again for your service. Well, after the break, we'll be chatting with sports broadcaster Paul Coit to get all the latest on the football. Please stay with us.
UK is looking wet and windy for some, with the driest weather in the north. Heavy rain will affect southwest England through this morning, bringing a risk of flooding and potential travel disruption. A mild but windy start to the day, with coastal gales likely. Rain will affect London and southeast England this morning. It'll be mostly light, but there will be some heavy bursts too, becoming increasingly windy. It'll be a wet and blustery start for southern Wales, with spells of heavy rain that could cause delays to transport this morning. Across the Midlands, rain will spread northeastwards through this morning, with some heavy bursts expected at times. It will be a mild but increasingly windy day, especially to the lee of higher ground. It will be a dry and generally cloudy start to today across northeast England. Rain will start to move in from the southwest through this morning, with some heavy spells at times, becoming windy. A dry but icy start across southern Scotland this morning, with some clear spells. Rain will move into the far south towards midday, though this will be mostly light at first. A band of rain will spread northeastwards across Northern Ireland through this morning, with some heavy bursts expected, becoming breezy towards midday, especially around northern and eastern coasts. Rain will continue northeastwards, with strong winds becoming widespread, and showers will follow this evening, some of which will be heavy. And that is how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us. We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Good morning and welcome back. The time has just gone 26 minutes past 8. Still lots to come on today's programme.
At 8:45, with the recent turmoil in the housing market, we're asking, are we about to say bye-bye to the buy-to-let market?
And at 9:10, we'll have advice on saving money on your energy bills in 2023 as the cost of living crisis continues to hit consumers.
And please get in touch in all the usual ways. Email GBViews at GB News or tweet at GB News. Loads coming in today, Ellie. New Year's resolutions, and also Corty here, who just gives a nice picture of his dog.
He does it all, does Paul Coyte?
I do it all, yes.
Provide dog pictures for me and sports news for the nation. And that's what you're here to do now, aren't you?
It is exactly what I'm here to do. I wonder do you reckon Cristiano Ronaldo is sitting there spitting blood, sitting over a Christmas dinner there, watching Manchester United and thinking, if I'd have been there, it would have been 5-0. I wonder what he actually truly thinks, because he fell out, didn't he, with spectacularly with Eric Ten Hag, and then did some ridiculous interview saying that he thought that it was all wrong and everybody was unhappy. Well, it seems that as soon as Cristiano Ronaldo moves away, everything seems to come together. Yeah. So it was the, divisive factor in what was going on there, and it all seems to be coming together, because Manchester United, I'm sorry to say, they're Dobbs, but lost to...
It's painful for
I know, it's really... But the thing is, is this closure for you, though? Does it help to talk about it?
Well, the season has still got a long way to roll, Corty, and I'm hoping for a bit of glimmer of hope from you at some point. I mean, it was 3-0 to Man United, and I have to say, Marcus Rashford, back from the World Cup, was absolutely outstanding. Man of the match. Got to say, they destroyed Forest, although I think we should have had a goal that was disallowed for offside.
Yep.
But, I mean, United are looking very, very tasty.
They are, and as Manny Rice-Davis said, they would say that, wouldn't they? But about the goal. But absolutely. And the thing is, there's certainly no shame at the moment to go to Old Trafford and lose a game there, because they are looking very good. And as I did mention before, I put my hands up, and I didn't think the Eric Ten Hag thing was going to work, and it is. So looking very good, and Marcus Rashford's playing very well as well. The other game, Chelsea and Bournemouth. Now, Chelsea have been on a terrible run, but it's that gap. Maybe that World Cup gap has made a difference, because I was also saying, another thing I got wrong, thinking that there was a chance that the World Cup would change things, that maybe Arsenal would come back. I mean, of course, Arsenal won. Spurs would come back different. No, exactly the same. A horrendous first half and then a much better second half. So it really does seem to be where we've left off. Although Bournemouth, it hasn't worked quite so well for them, because they had 11 points from 13. Gary O'Neill came in as manager and a caretaker. He's now taken over, but again, going to Chelsea, and Chelsea just rode all over them. I mean, there was no problem there, and they won 2-0. It could have been more as well.
Half-time, 2-0. The game was over at half-time, Corty.
It was.
The darts, the last of the great, unreconstructed, politically incorrect sports.
Do you think so? Do you still think politically incorrect?
Certainly in terms of the crowds. The crowds at the darts are
absolutely... It is wild.
Marvellous.
It's not those moments where, back in the day, where you would see some of the old darts player, they'd have a beer in one hand, they'd have a fag in the other, and then they'd be throwing the cigarette at the dartboard, and then it was... I mean, it's changed. It has changed because the thing is they've had to move with the times, and it's now the PDC World Darts Championship, and it's a fantastic event. It really is a fantastic event. So yesterday, Peter Snakebite Wright was knocked out yesterday. Now, he's an interesting character, Peter Wright. He's very quiet when you meet him. Very quiet, doesn't really say too much, and I've interviewed him on a number of occasions. Then you see, it's one of those characters that then you see him go out on stage, and he's got the Mohican, he wears the Grinch at Christmas gear as well, and a real character, but again, away from the oche, very quiet, very reserved, but not as you'd see. But anyway, he's the world champion and was knocked out by Kim Huybrechts of Belgium yesterday. So we're moving through. We're at round 3 now. Are you a fan of the darts there, Ellie?
I have not been to the darts, I must say, but I have seen lots of people going to the darts in their costumes. What? Do we know what that is?
Well,
people
it's just a thing. It's a fancy dress, you know. There's the amount of Oompa Loompas you will always see every day, which I don't know whether it's a good thing, but there's
like
always...
human-sized chickens and pigs.
Exactly, It's a whole farmyard of darts is what it is.
And my favourite was a Diane Abbott, where they were holding up a sign that said 190, which I thought was funny.
It was, it was very good.
And now I know for a fact that quite a few former darts glories watch GBNews. Bobby George.
The great Bobby George
watches GBNews. He follows me on Twitter.
Morning. He wears some jewellery, doesn't he, Bobby George? Loved Bobby George in the day. There were some great players, but, you know, things have moved on. There's younger players. There's a younger player which has come called Josh Rock, and Josh Rock is from Northern Ireland, 21 years old, and he beat Nathan Aspinall, someone I know very well, and he looked like he was going to have a good run, but this Josh Rock, 21, look out for him, Northern Irish, and I think he's going to go a very long way.
He's one to watch.
Another little story for you. So I once went to Wales to watch Phil the Power Taylor play in the off-season. He went to a working men's club in the Valleys, and he literally was on his knees playing the champion. He beat the local champion on his knees. And it was a very humiliating experience.
I was going to say, that is the most humiliating thing.
But it's blooming good to watch. Phil the Power Taylor was that good, he could beat a local champion on his knees.
Just showing off.
Well, there was a player that did this at the World Championship, did a no-look 180. And that's it, because if you think about it, and this is one of the great debates when it comes around sport, whether it's nature or nurture, whether you need to have a true talent. There's so many footballers that I've spoken to that have said, no, just pure hard work, whereas you see some great talents, you couldn't do that unless you've got something within you. And whereas darts, see, I'm going to annoy every darts player, professional darts player in the world now, is that surely what you're doing is you're throwing it in the same place all the time. Complete practice, practice, practice. So is it a natural talent that you have, hand-eye coordination, or is it just something where you just throw the thing in the same place? Well, this is what I'm challenging Ellie to do to get to the world title next year.
Well, I've practiced and practiced and practiced, and I'm still terrible.
Are you really?
So there goes
Not 180?
Well, I get OK about
You're
the
one every now and
mark.
again.
Yeah.
Paul, that's time, I'm afraid.
Is that it?
We love having you.
Fine.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Scotty. Cheers. Well, after the break, we'll be debating and discussing the stories making the papers today with Claire Purcell and Nigel Nelson. Back with you shortly.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events. And I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, the time's just gone 8:35. Let's bring you up to date with the stories making the front pages of the papers today.
And the Eye covers the escalating train strikes, with thousands to be balloted again under a new tactic to increase the number of major walkouts across the entire network.
The Mail has an exclusive. Union barons have launched a loyalty card scheme for strikers, designed, it claims, to artificially swell picket line numbers.
And the Telegraph says the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst is today urged to tackle an allegedly toxic culture of sexual assault embedded within the institution.
The Express says thousands of vulnerable cancer patients are being stranded in isolation without support during the cost of living crisis.
And The Guardian says hundreds of voluntary organisations have been forced to shut or scale back operations because of government delays in replacing EU funding.
Well, it's time to go through the papers now, and joining us this morning is political editor of Sunday People, Nigel Nelson, and former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall. And if you don't know, watching or listening at home, they are, in fact, a married couple. And this is the first time thing, isn't it?
Yes.
The two of you on opposing sides of the table on a paper review.
Indeed
and it's
it
been
is.
great fun. And we love the fireworks, so lots more of that, please. So, Claire, should we start with you in the Express? Something a bit different. Robots are making strikes and unions redundant.
Yes.
Different take on strikes.
It certainly is, and this could be a little warning for Mick Lynch of, be careful of what you wish. We are now seeing that transportation can be run by robots. The DLR in London does that quite successfully, and in this piece by Tim Newick, he says in Dubai the trains are driverless. They run perfectly fine. So you do suddenly have to look at it and think automation of the transport system could be the way forward. Then you remove... Oh, look, he's already looking at me. You remove the need for those unions. I mean, the piece is quite interesting because I don't think you can look at it for every single sector. You can potentially look at it for the border, because we've seen that with e-gates. However, you still do need a physical person when the e-gates don't work. But it is something, technology is playing a part in border security, and I think that will continue. The one thing it can't do is take over in the care sector, because I don't think a robot could be an exceptional midwife at all. You need some empathy, you need some humour, you need a little bit of human personality going on. And the same with care workers. This piece does sort of think that perhaps a robot could be trained to speak to elderly in care homes. But I think that is probably a step too far. But I think those industries, such as trains, buses, you could look as automation is the future.
I'm obsessed with the vocations and the sectors that will be replaced by automation. I think we should have a conversation with our children about it to make sure they don't choose them. But Nigel, I can see you bristling there about the idea, because don't forget, such far-right extremist countries such as Sweden and Denmark already have automated trains, so why not in the UK?
Well, we have them here. I mean, that I used to travel to one to work, which was the Docklands Light Railway in London. But although the train was driverless, you still had what they called a train captain on board, effectively a guard. And one of the issues about the RMT strike is they're trying to make driver-only trains, so there's no guard there. So the idea of having that human contact there, people travelling home late at night who might feel in danger, you've got somebody to take over the train if the robot system fails. What it means is that people still play a part. And so, you know, you don't have sort of robots joining unions, you have people joining unions, and they would remain within that system. But it just seems to me right that you have at least a human on board. I'm not in favour of driver-only trains that aren't automated. I think you need that extra person there.
Well, some might say that Mick Lynch looks like a bit of a robot, and he certainly just repeats the same thing and doesn't seem to budge. Anyway, I digress. Nigel, another wave. Oh, God, not another strike, Nigel.
More strikes. Junior
doctors this time, is it?
Yeah, this is junior doctors, and this is a survey by British Medical Association, their union, and what it's showing is that 65% of junior docs have actually researched leaving the profession, while 8 in 10 are thinking about it. I think this is partly shows the dire state of the NHS at the moment. And of course, we've got junior doctors balloting next month for strike action. So we'd like to see a situation where we're going to have nurses, ambulance drivers, junior doctors, all of them coming out next month. What we've got to do is just take a grip of the NHS, and I think there's nothing wrong with the people who work there. They're absolutely fantastic. What is wrong is the system, and the system has got to be reformed.
I wonder if, Claire, something I get really quite concerned about is that people have years and years been trained how to be a great doctor in the UK, and then suddenly they swan off abroad and go to Australia, and, you know, it's not cricket, is it?
It isn't, and they should stay in the NHS. And I do think, in this respect, I think Nigel does have a point that you need to have a greater conversation about the NHS and its structure. Because, yes, we have trained these individuals to be doctors, but there's a lot of time and money being poured into it. These are very astute, trained people that we need to be able to keep. We shouldn't lose them to other countries. But the system itself, I think, lets that down. It's not a case of pouring more money into the NHS at all. I really hate that argument that it's underfunded. It really, really isn't. It is badly structured. So I think that needs to...
How do we save money then, so these people don't have to clear off abroad? How do we save money in the NHS?
Oh, I think you could make some quite easy reforms by removing diversity officers. Let's all be honest. When you see positions like that for 60, 70, 80,000 pounds being advertised within the NHS, a diversity officer doesn't save lives.
Nigel, would you rather have a junior doctor or maybe 2 or 3, or a diversity officer?
Well, if I was ill, I'd rather a junior doctor. But diversity officers and managers are important. You're talking about the 5th largest employer in the world. It needs to be managed.
Right, Claire, this is quite a shocking story this morning. Perhaps not surprised if you are a parent. I was speaking to a mother this morning who said this didn't surprise her at all, this story in the Eye. It's about sugary baby food. Really full of sugar, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think this was really surprising, is just how much sugar are in these baby and toddler food packages. And in 2019, the government issued a review of this, which stated that there are inconsistencies between national recommendations and the ingredients in these food products. But there is absolutely no guidance on the amount of salt and sugar in baby and toddler foods. And if you think this is your introduction to the world of solid food, and if you're being put on something that is quite sugary, sweet or salty, that is going to set your taste buds up for life, and levels of obesity and tooth decay later in life are going to be enormous. The repercussions of it are absolutely huge. But it was the baby pouches aimed at children under 12 months, which contained more sugar by volume than Coca-Cola.
Now, I've got to say,
really shocking.
Confession to make, my two glorious children are watching. Hello, Sonny and Dolly, if you're at home. So Sonny is 13, Dolly is 8. Sonny, I did spend a lot of time making baby food for you. Dolly, I didn't do that for you. Because guess what? It takes forever.
It does.
And these pouches, you know...
They're great.
I kind of get where parents are coming from because they're quick, they're convenient, OK, they're expensive. But who's got the time to be making risotto for kids, Claire?
Well, this is it. And I admired all of those parents that spent their weeks and weekends pureeing food and putting it into ice cube containers and putting it in the freezer. When, to be fair, there was a pouch that was there ready to go. I could put in my bag. And my son, hello, James, if you're watching, you did have these pouches. And loved them. It is. But you're right. I wish I had more time to have done that. But unfortunately, life got in the way.
We've got another story here from the Eye, Nigel, one of yours, again about food for kids. This is expanding the free school meals programme.
Yeah, which seems like a good idea. This is coming from Tony Blair, also backed up from the other side by the former Chancellor, George Osborne. And the argument is that if you give children nutritious free school meals, you will actually solve an obesity crisis down the road. That will save the NHS money and so on. So, I mean, it seems like a good idea here that I think that kids now have gone to packed lunches, which are not the most healthy things to have. And if you have a decent free school meal service, it's not hugely expensive. We discovered that during the pandemic when Boris Johnson tried to stop them being served in the holidays. It was 120 million. And that's not a lot of money. So the idea of actually expanding it, making the school food better so kids actually want it, that could save an awful lot of trouble down the road.
I wonder if in 2023, Claire, the media could make it a New Year's resolution to stop asking Tony Blair what he thinks.
I would really enjoy that if it were to come true. I think the one problem I have here is that I don't have an issue with free school meals, and I think that they are a benefit to the majority of children. What I have a problem with is tackling obesity and suggesting that free school meals are going to solve it. Anybody that has seen a school meal knows that they aren't actually nutritionally great.
But they could be better.
They could be, but unfortunately, because kitchens are not there and these are quite often bought in, the food isn't there. And when children go to get whatever it is that they wanted to eat at lunchtime, it's gone, and they have to have a sort of cobbled-together selection or even a sandwich made by the kitchen staff so they don't go hungry.
I used to love school meals. I used to absolutely love them.
Did you?
But back in my day, it was all sticky toffee pudding.
Precisely.
Yeah, it was great.
Custard.
School cake with the pink custard over
Really
the top.
unhealthy.
Didn't help with
lovely.
obesity, though.
Well, look, come on, two fine figures here.
Jamie Oliver came in and had away with all of that when I was at school. So we didn't have very fun school meals.
Jamie stole your childhood.
He stole my sticky toffee.
Your turkey twizzlers.
Here's one that you want to cover, Ellie, about wine.
Yeah, let's talk about wine, Claire, shall we?
Oh, let's. This is I thought this was quite funny. That 2 in 5 wine drinkers bluff their way through a wine list to pretend that they have more knowledge. 41% of wine drinkers admit that they are clueless when it comes to wine. And I think we've all met that person that you've been out with who will...
I am that person.
I think I bluff quite a lot as well, to be honest.
I think everybody does, but the person that tastes the wine who just goes, oh, yes, that's marvellous. And I think they would say that irrelevant of what it was in their glass. And people go for, quite interestingly, the pretty labels on the wine. I mean, I tend to look at the one that's in my budget.
Guilty.
And whatever's on spesh if I'm out, you know, because it's a cost thing. And expensive wines don't always taste best.
Yeah,
and
that's
I think
true.
there is a little bit of you should have what you like, not to impress somebody else. If you like it, you enjoy the taste, you go for it. You don't have to have something very expensive just to impress people that you're with.
Because the mind can boggle, can't it, when you're reading a wine list at a restaurant and you're just like, what do I do now? And for some people, it will be, you know, the one that they can pronounce.
Just go for the house white.
Yeah,
it's easy.
House, make it easy. But this is, I think this might be one of my New Year's resolutions. And we were laughing in the break where Martin was like, what to drink next? I was like, no, to know my wines more. So a bit more wine knowledge.
I've got a fail-safe solution. In a restaurant, go for the second cheapest.
Yeah.
And in a supermarket, go for the one that's on offer with the most money off.
Yes.
Seems to work.
And a money-saving tip as well.
Yeah, it seems to work.
Exactly. Yeah.
Very good.
No, I don't disagree.
Connoisseur speaks.
Nigel, we haven't got very long, but let's just have a brief glance, shall we, at this story in the Telegraph about police failing to solve thefts.
Yeah, these are some new figures that have come out, and this is more than 1 million thefts that they've not found suspects for over the last year. And some of the criticism has come down to the fact that police spend their time monitoring Twitter and things like that. And one of the things that Rishi Sunak had said during his leadership campaign was they must put a stop to that. But to be fair to the police, they only investigate the complaints that come before them. And if someone complains about a tweet, they must investigate it. The answer is Rishi Sunak should change the law.
Yeah, complete waste of time. They should be policing the streets and not policing tweets. And I think on that bombshell, we should probably call time. Thank you, Nigel and Claire, for being very civil.
Yes.
For a married couple. Next time, let's have a bit more fur fly.
Wait an hour later.
See you in an hour's time. Thank you.
Let's bring you up to date with today's other news stories. West Midlands Police have named a 23-year-old man who was killed at a nightclub in Birmingham on Boxing Day as Cody Fisher. Officers were called to the Crane nightclub after reports that a man had been stabbed on the dance floor. Hundreds of people were at the club at the time, and witnesses are being urged to come forward.
Another man down in his prime, sad story. And the city of Buffalo in New York State has started the cleanup after a severe blizzard hit it, causing 28 fatalities, with many people freezing to death in their cars. Authorities have been digging out from under 4 feet of snow after a record amount of snow fell. Across the US, at least 60 people have died because of the storm.
Some families could experience a tax rate of at least 80% in 2023 due to a collision between 2 welfare systems. That's according to the Resolution Foundation. Around 50,000 families will see child benefits withdrawn at the same time as universal credit. Well, lots of you have been getting in touch with us this morning on all the different topics that we've been covering. Lord Brother Daz has got in touch on Twitter. He said, "You're 100% correct in your comment earlier. The armed forces are stepping in to cover well-paid jobs when they are on a fraction of their wages. If anybody's wage needs increasing, it is our armed forces. It's a disgrace that they are missing leave to do this for nothing."
Very heartening, though, Eddie, that so many members of the armed services are watching the show and getting in touch. And once again, just want to say thanks for all your efforts. And like I said earlier to Robert from the Evening Standard, the defence editor there, I think they're doing the very best to get a pay rise. They're quietly going about their service. They're not throwing a hissy fit. OK.
Yeah. Best of British, as you said earlier.
Best of British, OK. And we have another one, Ellie. On English devolution, we were chatting about whether we should have an English Parliament, and Chris says, "I'm Welsh, but I've been living in England for nearly 40 years, and it's right that England should have its own Parliament." After all, no one really stands up for England at all. Hear to that.
Yeah, well, do let us know what you think about that. GBNews at gbnews.uk. We're also talking about New Year's resolutions as well. So have you started to think about that yet? Let us know what you're going to aim to do or not do in 2023. Now, the economic fallout of Russia's war in Ukraine and the long-term impacts of the pandemic have led to turbulent times for Britain's housing market.
House prices since COVID have risen 20%, but the latest predictions from the Office of Budget Responsibility forecast a 9% drop by the autumn of 2024.
And landlords are selling up en masse as they face high mortgage rates, coupled with reduced tax relief, disrupting the buy-to-let business model.
Well, joining us now to explain what's going on is property expert Russell Quirk. So, Russell, for homeowners out there, are bricks and mortar still the safest bet?
They are, absolutely. And look, we've got to stop looking at property prices on a monthly basis. You know, we seem to have this obsession because we are a nation of kind of homeowners, or indeed wannabe homeowners. We tend to look at property by way of all of the indexes that are published on a monthly basis from the ONS, from Halifax, Rightmove, Nationwide, and so on. We tend to get kind of obsessed on a monthly basis as if we're trading property as if they were stocks and shares or commodities. Of course, course, most people buy a property to live in rather than it being an investment. And most people live in that property for a decent amount of time. And even buy-to-let investors, there's been a lot said in recent days and weeks about the state of the buy-to-let market and the fact, as you just alluded to in your intro, that lots and lots of investors and landlords are exiting the sector. Frankly, Martin, I don't buy into that. I don't believe that the forecasts whereby landlords are said to be leaving the sector in droves, I don't think that will bear truth, for a number of reasons that I can wax lyrical about if you want me to.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit more, because that is very interesting. That, you know, especially if you're renting, lots of people are very, very concerned. I was speaking to some producers out there this morning about rents going up en masse, as well as landlords are going to have to pass on these higher mortgage rates, higher interest rates as well. Will there just be landlords who just think, let's just sell up because I simply can't afford to keep up with these higher mortgage rates?
Well, I think predominantly no. I mean, there will always be some, you know, perhaps what we call kind of accidental landlords, you know, the amateur short-term landlords that have kind of dipped into the sector. But most landlords take a long-term view, whether that's a 10 or 15 or 20% view. And they don't just look at rent and what we call the yield, which is the percentage return that you get based on the value of the property. Landlords will also look at capital appreciation. And as you said just now, a couple of minutes ago, house prices across Britain over the last 2 years are up by about 22%. So if you're a buy-to-let landlord sitting on 5 or 10 properties and they're worth £100,000 each, well, you've just made £20,000 times the number of properties in your portfolio. So it's not just about rental and yield. It is about capital appreciation. There's also the fact, though, let's not forget that not every landlord has a mortgage. Many landlords buy for cash, so therefore the effect of mortgage rates and fixed rate mortgages increasing doesn't affect them. But with regard to fixed rate mortgages, the majority of landlords will be on a fixed rate. So, of course, despite what's happening with interest rates in the market right now, they're going to be protected because they're on a fixed rate. And by the time most of them come off that fixed rate, they're going to see fixed rate mortgages, certainly into next year in Q1 and Q2, having come down. Fixed rates, and again, this is not much reported, fixed rate mortgages peaked about a month ago in terms of their cost. Why? Because the cost of money in terms of the wholesale markets has started to reduce quite significantly since about the middle of November this year. So landlords actually, although some will lament the sector, because of course it's been very, very good over the last few years, generally when you take all of those things into consideration, landlords actually are having a fairly decent time of it.
So, Russell, nice bit of positive messaging there. So we're expecting the market to settle down. Inflation, hopefully, I'm glass half full here, really, it's going to be under control. So if people are looking to move now and they're concerned about high interest rates, is it just a good time to sit this out, or are there some good deals out there?
Well, I think that there will be some sellers that need to sell. You know, we have a market in the UK that's made up of about 1 million transactions a year, and obviously that changes year to year depending on all sorts of external factors. But within that 1 million movers a year, there are obviously some sellers that have to move. Now, if some of them are sitting there and have been on the market for a month or two, there may well be some bargains around because sellers are particularly motivated to want to sell right now. I don't think buyers should wait. And you know, there seems to be almost at every opportunity an expert here and an expert there that will advise first-time buyers to wait it out. Now, I've been listening to that false advice, which frankly I think it is, since the days of the Brexit referendum being announced by David Cameron back in 2013-14. We were told by experts like Capital Economics and other doomsayers that if you waited, house prices would drop, and therefore, as a first-time buyer, you'd be better off. Well, if you'd waited from then till now, well, you're actually now 75% worse off. So we need to understand what the market does. And we may see 2 to 3 months of house price dilution, which we're now seeing. But in the medium to long term, house prices will always go up. So if you're sitting there thinking about buying, I'm not suggesting you dive in now, but certainly don't hesitate. Don't wait for months and months and months, because house prices will start to accelerate again during 2023.
OK, Russell Quirk, that's a great positive note to end on there. Thank you for your time this morning. Appreciate it.
You're with Breakfast on GB News. Lots more coming up on the programme, so stay with us. We're just going to go to a short break.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 9 o'clock on Wednesday the 28th of December. This is Breakfast on GB News with Ellie Costello and Martin Dorbin. Here's what's leading the news this morning.
Members of the armed forces are stepping up at airports across the UK as Border Force staff strike again. We'll be live at Gatwick Airport to see if it's having the disruptive effect that the union is hoping for.
As the government launches a new campaign to encourage us to save energy, we'll speak to an expert with top tips on cutting down your energy consumption in 2023.
And September the 8th, 2022 was the day we lost our longest-serving monarch. We'll reflect on that day and the days that followed as the nation mourned Her Majesty the Queen.
I think many of us are still coming to terms with that, Ellie. Really are. I think the King's speech was a reminder that there's a new era has been beckoned in. So tell us what you think about that. You can join in any of our discussions by emailing gbviews at GB News, or of course you can tweet us at GB News. Border Force staff are striking for yet another 4 days today at airports across Britain and at the port of Newhaven.
Yes, the strike could mean delays at the border, and it comes as a wave of other strikes have rattled public services this month. Well, our national reporter Theo Jakomba is at Gatwick Airport this morning and is still lashing it down with rain. Theo, is it going to be the chaos and the delays that the union is so hoping for at Gatwick Airport this morning?
Good morning. Well, this morning it's another one of those days where members are walking out. So these are PCS union members, a majority of them who work at some of the major airports across the country. A lot of these people are the ones who check people's passports, check goods, and have the power to ensure that people come in and out of the country safely, and of course keeping the other passengers safe who do so. We've heard from Mark Sawatka, who's the General Secretary of PCS Union, and he's saying they have a mandate to continue walking out for the next 6 months if a deal isn't put on the table. The government has offered a 2% pay rise, but they say it's well below inflation. Now, part of their campaign in the last couple of months, They spoke to their members, about 1,000 members who are walking out, saying cost of living is their biggest priority, that they want to see sorted to find a deal in this situation that they find themselves in. In terms of delay, last week there were some strike dates which were happening. Border Force saying they didn't want this to happen, to see military personnel, as we've heard this morning, who are in there today and across the country as well. But they're saying, you know, hopefully there is a resolution to this. In terms of delays itself, last week airport bosses were saying it was free flowing, but there has been some criticism of that from the PCS union. They're saying it's only free flowing because the people that they've put in haven't been adequately trained. They've been trained in such a short space of time, and of course this means that there's people just going in without too much disruption. So we'll yet to see what happens throughout the day, and of course whether there is going to be substantive delays for passengers going in and out of the airports.
Well, Theo Chicomba, thank you so much for bringing us that update at Gatwick Airport. And if you are heading home and you've had a lovely festive holiday somewhere hopefully very hot and sunny and not wet and windy like it was there for Theo Chicomba, that you get through with little to no delay.
You know, Theo goes in for a nice, well-earned, hot cup of tea.
Yeah, and that.
Well, here to give us an overview of what these strikes might look like for winter holiday makers is the CEO for the travel consultancy PC Group, Paul Charles. Good morning, Paul. So, so far we heard from Simon Calder, our travel guru, earlier, that it's been the least effective strike of all time. It's business as normal at Border Force. Can we expect the same this week?
Well, we're going to see more flights coming in over the next 3 days. So I think we've yet to see whether this strike has any impact or not. But certainly on the face of it at the moment, it hasn't had the desired impact that the PCS union wanted. There are some 1,200 flights due to land, 1,200 arrivals due to come into the 6 airports affected by the strike today. So we'll see if there are any backing up and queues in arrivals. But so far, the allegation from the unions is that the military have simply been waving through people without properly checking passports, those passports that are not going through the e-gates. I'd find that surprising. I think the military will be doing a very good job. They're well trained for this sort of eventuality, and they're simply smoothly seeing passengers through.
Well, on that note, Paul, we had Robert Fox, the defence editor of the Evening Standard, here earlier, and he was saying that while armed forces personnel don't have the power to stop, there are still people at the borders who can do that. So I think it's unfair to intimate that somehow our borders have been compromised. Our armed services are doing a magnificent job, aren't they, Ellie?
But there is a question, isn't there, Paul, of are the unions kind of weakening their bargaining power with just how good our armed forces personnel are being? I mean, things are running smoothly, but for the unions, they want to cause chaos. They want to cause disruption.
Well, I think there are two things here. First of all, the unions are definite in terms of future strikes. They want to see more strikes until the government comes to the negotiation table and essentially increases their pay. But the government shows no sign of doing that, not just in this dispute, but in other disputes such as rail and also highways disputes, for example, when it comes to transport. So if the government's not going to budge, the strikers are going to carry on setting dates in the new year. The second thing is that actually many people would like to see the military operating at our airports. It's done in overseas airports, especially in Italy and in Spain and Morocco, and they have seamless services as you arrive or depart from their airports. So you could argue, in fact, it may be useful for this trial to be taking place, for the military to be standing in for the PCS union, and maybe it will become more of a long-term thing because the airports will say, oh, it was much smoother. We'd love to see the military acting in this way. And so it might give the government an idea to reduce the number of workers they need from the PCS union and increase those from the military who are doing such a good job.
I certainly agree. I think the armed services have put forward the best advert possible to give them a pay rise.
Yeah.
Because they've stepped in, they've selflessly performed their duty as you would expect. Now, moving forward to the rest of the year, there was a lot of emphasis on the staycation because of lockdowns. Is that something you think that all of these strikes might make people be even more likely to do this year? Britain's getting pretty crowded on its coast at summertime, isn't it, Paul?
Well, what the strikes are doing is putting off people from perhaps what were traditional travel plans. So they're saying, I'm not sure I want to go overseas in such a rush because of the airport issues that haven't emerged yet. So they're choosing staycations instead. And I think that trend will continue. In fact, I know it will continue well into 2023. When you look at the forward bookings that UK hotels, UK cottage companies and villa companies are seeing, they are seeing huge bookings for summer 2023 within the UK. And there are many people who are saying, well, I'm not prepared to go through the airport, or I don't want to pay for the higher cost of a flight because those flight costs have been rising due to inflation. I will simply stay in the UK and have a great week in the Cotswolds or on the coast somewhere. So that's what we're seeing in terms of the trend. Having said that, there are still very strong bookings, very high demand for travelling overseas well into summer of next year. Some of the airlines are seeing some of their strongest bookings for 3 or 4 years now. So I think we're seeing people who've saved money, perhaps during COVID lockdowns, or who are commuting less and staying at home so they're not spending as much on their commute. They're using that money to travel more, especially to see friends and family.
Charles, really good to have you on the programme. That's the CEO for the PC Group, Paul Charles there, who's basically saying we all need a holiday, don't we? At home or abroad.
And look on the bright side, you know, the domestic travel industry had a tough time during lockdown. So if people are going to go to a B&B or a guest house in the UK, then good luck to those businesses, I think.
Yeah, but as with anything, it's very expensive, isn't it? And especially with energy bills at the moment. For many, many people, a holiday is not something that they can afford.
That's true. OK. So in a new government ad campaign, households have been urged to take simple steps to make energy savings on their bills.
Yes, families across the nation have faced soaring energy costs as Russia's invasion of Ukraine sent wholesale gas prices to record highs.
The tips will also help to bring down Britain's energy consumption, reducing the strain on the national grid. Let's have a listen to the advice.
This is a 30-second ad. That's not long, but it's long enough to do something that could save you money on your energy bills. In 30 seconds, you can turn a boiler flow temperature down here, or switch these off there. Change this, reduce that, or close all of these at night. Each one you do will be 30 seconds well spent. They all add up and could save you money. Visit gov.uk/save energy for more energy saving ideas.
Well, joining us now is consumer champion, friend of the programme and founder of How to Save It, Will Hodgson. How are you, Will?
Very well.
Did you have a lovely Christmas and Boxing Day?
It was fantastic. I was saying to Martin, my brother brought over a recently castrated cat who caused mayhem, but apart from that, we had a wonderful Christmas.
As you do.
That's a bit of family drama. There's always time for that, isn't there? Will, let's talk then about saving money on our energy bills, because that's what you do best, isn't it? Simple changes around the house to save money on our bills. What can people do?
Well, listen to this government campaign. There's lots of really handy tips, and it doesn't take money to do it. So the most compelling one probably is to reduce the flow temperature of your boiler. As it stands, your boiler is pumping out water about 75 degrees. It doesn't need to be that hot, 60 degrees.
How do you do that, though? Because I keep hearing that on the tally, but I don't have a clue how to do it. What do I do?
Best thing to do is to look at what boiler you have, Google it, and there'll be a very simple video and instruction. There's not much you can't find out.
It's just turning down a valve.
It is straightforward. It is very straightforward, but it varies a little bit from device to device. So Google your one, be able to work out how to do it. Then you've got other things, like, for example, most people don't realise you can run your washing machine for 40 degrees or less for almost every load you put in there. If you're getting it at 50, 60 degrees, you're throwing away about £70 per year. So that's one to look at as well. Tumble dryers, super energy inefficient. If you can get away with not using those, that is a great idea. All of this, you have to say, is one last dance on the political grave of Liz Truss, who said, I don't want to do nanny state intervention, and she refused to pony up this £20 million government information campaign. I have to say, for my part, given that she also put the government, or rather the taxpayer, on the hook for every bill in the country, and that was going to cost us billions of pounds. To me, it makes perfect sense. The government has done this campaign, which hopefully helps to reduce our usage by 5 10% somehow.
One thing I've noticed, I said this to you earlier, is that practically everybody I know this year has been given one of those wearable blankets for Christmas. It's like a big blanket you wear. I mean, they're about 40 or 50 quid. They're not cheap, those things, but are they worth getting? So basically you stay warm and you keep the heating turned down.
It could be, and it taps into the key principle about all of this stuff, which is keeping heat where you need it most. And I'm afraid the brutal reality is where you need it most is about your person, about your body. Other tips, like using your curtains, making sure that your curtains are closed at night, that is a form of insulation, which, as Ellie knows, one of my favourite subjects. And if anything, that's my one slight gripe about this campaign. These little handy tips and tricks in and around a few marginal issues. It's a bit like the government saying, we're under invasion. Every household has to defend itself. So we're going to release a video showing you how you can make a lethal weapon out of a toothbrush.
Yeah.
And you think to yourself, well, that's great, but couldn't you maybe give me an assault rifle? And the truth is, what you need really to bring down Britain's bills permanently is not behavioural tips, it's structural assistance, by which I mean nothing short of a national insulation campaign. And the video does hint at this, in fact.
Yeah, but there's not a lot of money around at the moment to pay for the basics. We can't afford to pay nurses, we can't afford to pay train drivers. How much dosh are you talking about for a nationwide insulation campaign?
Well, there's about 8 million homes in Britain which need their loft insulated. To do that would cost, at about £500 to £600 a pop, it would cost the country about £4.5 billion. Now, that seems like a huge amount of money. Do not forget, the government has put the taxpayer on the hook for every bill in the land. So if they can help us reduce the money that we're spending on energy bills, they're reducing the money that the taxpayer has to spend at the end of the energy price guarantee to keep us afloat. So we're talking about billions of pounds of investment, but it's going to pay back rapidly because energy has never been so expensive.
So if the government paid for each household to be insulated, how much typically could an average household save on their annual bills just by not losing heat through the roof?
Just for that one alone, you're looking at reducing your heating costs by about 20%. And this is why it feels like such a no-brainer. Now, this is a kind of another piece of recent British political history. It was David Cameron 10 years ago who said, let's cut the green crap. By green crap, what he meant was energy efficiency crap, which I would call permanent savings. There's been research that shows if he hadn't done that, we'd have gone ahead, insulated our homes at the rate we were doing so before, we would have saved billions of pounds at this point. We all know it's good to fix the roof while the sun is shining. In retrospect, that was 10 years ago when the cost of living was relatively low. The cost of borrowing for the government was absolutely low. But the truth is right now, the rain is metaphorically pouring into the living room. Fixing the roof is completely urgent. So that's why the government needs to kick on from giving us tips and actually put in place a meaningful programme to help us insulate our homes. And we as British consumers should expect no less than serious help.
Well, you did say that insulation was your pet project, and less of the castrated pets next time, perhaps, Will. Thank you for your time this morning. Well done.
Well, the time has just gone 16 minutes past 9. Let's get a check on the latest news headlines for you now.
And 4 people have been injured in a suspected gas explosion at a house in Worcestershire. Emergency services were called to the incident in Evesham yesterday evening. 3 of the injured were taken to hospital and 10 neighbouring properties were also evacuated.
Labour is warning families are losing millions of pounds due to unsolved thefts. The party says more than 1 million thefts weren't solved last year, with cases dropped because police failed to find a suspect. Labour called the figures disgraceful. A Home Office spokesperson said the government is supporting the police through record investment and the recruitment of 20,000 additional officers by March 2023.
And the UK is facing ice and heavy rain with the potential of flooding in some areas. A yellow rain warning in place for parts of southwest England and South Wales until 3 o'clock today. Meanwhile, the Met Office has a yellow alert in place for snow and ice in the north and east of Scotland until 10 o'clock this morning.
We've been great this morning, getting in touch with all your views about the issues that we have been discussing today. We're just talking about property. Nigel's just been in touch on Twitter saying property probably still the best investment for the mid-long term unless somebody else knows better. Well, Russell Quirk was on with us earlier and he was saying that bricks and mortar is still the best investment.
And I think that's really good news for a lot of people watching who are fortunate to own their own homes. I mean, a lot of young people, of course, can't get on the ladder, but it's just nice to get a bit of calming, positive news at the moment, isn't it, rather than all the constant doom and gloom.
It was good, wasn't it?
OK, on the strike action, David says the strikes are clearly designed to bring down the government, but the union leaders have no sense. The government will probably lose the next election anyway.
Richard's been in touch. Good morning to you, Richard. And he says, I hope the strikers had a lovely Christmas. I had to tell 50 of Royal Navy personnel from my unit alone to cancel their leave and work over the Christmas period to cover the strike. So that really hits home, doesn't it? It's that idea of duty first for our armed forces, really.
Yeah, and the armed forces picking up the piece. And once again, thank you to all the armed service people out there who've stepped up to the mark. Also on the train strikes, Alan says driverless trains will bring many benefits, including no cancellations due to drivers not turning up for work.
Well, after the break, we'll be chatting with sports broadcaster Paul Coit to get all of the very latest news, so do stay with us. UK is looking wet and windy for some, with the driest weather in the north. Heavy rain will affect southwest England through this morning, bringing a risk of flooding and potential travel disruption. A mild but windy start to the day, with coastal gales likely. Rain will affect London and southeast England this morning. It'll be mostly light, but there will be some heavy bursts too, becoming increasingly windy. It'll be a wet and blustery start for southern Wales, with spells of heavy rain that could cause delays to transport this morning. Across the Midlands, rain will spread northeastwards through this morning, with some heavy bursts expected at times. It will be a mild but increasingly windy day, especially to the lee of higher ground. It'll be a dry and generally cloudy start to today across northeast England. Rain will start to move in from the southwest through this morning, with some heavy spells at times, becoming windy. A dry but icy start across southern Scotland this morning, with some clear spells. Rain will move into the far south towards midday, though this will be mostly light at first. A band of rain will spread northeastwards across Northern Ireland through this morning, with some heavy bursts expected, becoming breezy towards midday, especially around northern and eastern coasts. Rain will continue northeastwards, with strong winds becoming widespread, and showers will follow this evening, some of which will be heavy. And that is how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel. Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
As a guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back and good morning to you. The time has just gone 23 minutes past 9. It's time for some sport now. And joining us in the studio is sports broadcaster and our good friend, Paul Coit.
Morning.
How are you this morning?
Yeah. I'm very good. Well, actually, I'm a bit under the weather. I think we're all a bit under the weather, aren't we? We're a little under the weather. Not that we like to complain. I know. Poor Martin, feeling $1 million, and then he gets home and thinking, I've caught something. I don't know where it's come from. I think it's been coming from both sides. Yeah. So, football, last night, then Manchester United. Poor Martin. I have to keep mentioning Nottingham Forest getting beaten by Manchester United.
We were robbed. There should have been a disallowed. There was disallowed goal on the stroke of half time. Forest would have been 2-1.
You know,
look, Man United were absolutely rampant.
They were. It was another one of those VAR decisions, wasn't it? Which was like this, but it's either off or it's on. You draw the line somewhere, and
it was offside. I will concede.
Yeah. Chelsea beat Bournemouth 2-0. Chelsea were having a terrible time before that. Lost 3 on the trot, and so they're looking better now. Although I say looking better, I mean it's one game. Yeah. And with respect, it was Bournemouth who I didn't think were too impressive yesterday, although they had a good run up to now, but. Of course, we've had a big gap. So then the Christmas schedule will be continuing.
How do you think that kind of World Cup break has affected teams? And Man United Marcus Rashford, the star player in many ways for England, became the star player for Man United last night. Seems to be a seamless transition back into the Premier League.
Absolutely. But the thing is, we've got to remember that the time of year, this is probably the fittest that these players are going to be.
Yeah.
So this is why I think the World Cup was a success as far as the football was concerned. I mean, it's always going to be good. But we're not going to get players towards the end of the season that are getting injured, that are getting tired, because it is a long season. So if you think of when the season begins, it takes a while for them to get going, get up to speed. So then when we're looking around December time, that is when they're going to be at their peak fitness. So I think that's why there was a big World Cup. It was a good World Cup. And then coming back, it's not going to be that tricky, is it? I mean, it's not that... We're talking what? 7-hour flight in luxury, come back, start training again. Mentally, is it going to affect players? I don't know. I think that's debatable. But then we've got other players, and of course Argentina is still celebrating. Yeah. So when Argentinian players are actually going to make their way back, I don't know. But on the whole, I don't think it would have affected them adversely at all.
Good. Well, what else we got apart from football?
Well, there is a little bit more football, and that's Dean Smith. Now, Dean Smith, who's the manager of Norwich. Now, Norwich, great... I don't want to be disrespectful to Norwich, but they know what it's like. They're a great yo-yo club. Yeah. They go up, then they get into the Premier League, and then often they go down, and then we go up again. Now, Dean Smith took over, and it was about 9 months ago, and it just hasn't gone the way they wanted. They're in 5th at the moment. They're 15 points off Burnley, who are absolutely flying. So this is also the time with a manager. Now, do you think, are we going to stick or twist now? This is the time that we need to make a change. So there's going to be the same old names are going to come up. There's going to be Sean Dyche, I'm sure he's going to mention. Nobody's mentioned Steve Bruce. Steve Bruce, who played for Norwich in the day, so that's an idea.
But Big Sam, what's he up to?
Big Sam is always mentioned. If the money's right, Big Sam may be there. But how about this one from left field? Frank Lampard. Ooh. There's someone who is in a job at the moment. He's at Everton. It's not going terribly well at Everton. Maybe I'm looking a little too forward here. And if you think if the results don't go very well at Everton, then maybe Norwich would be very interested to say, Frank, why don't you come over and do what you did with Derby? So it all depends how Frank is in the situation. But then again, I'm probably picking stuff before it's actually happened. But Dean Smith is out, and Norwich looking for a new manager.
Lampard's looking, I think, in choppy water. Everton.
Without doubt.
They're really struggling to find their form, aren't they?
Yeah, they really are. And it's Jordan Pickford as well. This great goalkeeper, England goalkeeper, he's now going to be thinking, now, what do I do here? Because my contract is coming up at the end of the season. Do I then look for a move or do I stick around? So it is a worrying time with Everton. And also they've got a brand new stadium that's going to be built. So they need success and they need to be in the Premier League. I mean, it'd be a disaster if Everton went down, although it was very close last season as well. So we'll watch what happens with Frank.
Should we have a word on Djokovic? And he's back in Australia.
He is back in Australia. I remember sitting in this chair back in January saying, well, it looks like he's going to be thrown out. He was kept over, wasn't he? And then he was banned.
That was a big drama, wasn't it?
It was huge. It was a huge drama. Now, he was banned from going back to Australia for 3 years because of the COVID rules there, and he wasn't vaccinated. We remember all the story now. I mean, it seems a million miles away now.
It does. Yeah.
So he's now flown back. That 3-year ban was overturned a couple of months ago, so he's allowed to play. The Australian Open is his favourite tennis tournament. So he's one major behind still Rafael Nadal if he wants to make that 22. So he plays in the Adelaide Open on Sunday. Now welcome back with open arms. See, everybody was expecting boos. I think everybody's forgotten now.
I think he'll do it, don't you?
I think he will. I really think he will.
And I think he deserves it.
You think he deserves it?
I think he does, because I think he was very unfairly treated during the whole COVID thing. He was made a global scapegoat simply for believing in bodily autonomy. Maybe that's an unfashionable thing to bring up.
Yep.
But they've reversed the ban. I think they know they were wrong. They just made an example of him, and I think he deserves to go and win and have his Hollywood ending.
I think at the time, it's very difficult. I can see what you're saying, but I think the public opinion in Australia was completely in the other direction at the time. I mean, they were going through a horrendous COVID time. People were locked down, and all they saw was this guy flying in, well, I can do whatever I want, I've decided that, and people are thinking, well, it's laws for one and laws for the other. I mean, we're moving away from sport here, but now he's come back over now, I think a lot of it has been forgotten. So, you know, whether it's going to be the Hollywood ending, whether you call it Hollywood ending, I just think that he probably will win this tournament because that's his tournament and that's what he wants, I think, especially after what happened last year more than anything else.
I think that'd be a nice bit of karma, personally.
Should we have a quick word to end on the cricket? A very unfortunate incident in the game.
It was a very interesting. Annie Nokia, who is the South African bowler. South Africa are playing Australia at the moment, and it's one of those bizarre injuries. I wish we had the footage, but maybe we can try and reenact this. You know those spider cams?
Yes. They're on cables.
That's it. They're on cables, and they can move anywhere.
Yeah.
And you think, wow, you know, it's like you're right in the middle of everything that's going on. Well, there was right in the middle, and there was probably
I'll be him.
Too much in the middle. So here comes the spider cam. So the spider cams, you're standing there fielding. The spider cam comes bash. I mean, this is a huge camera that's whacked him, and he's gone down thinking, what?
He actually went down?
Earth. Yeah. So what on earth was that? And all he can see is the spider cam then taken off. And there's been complaints before because there are cricketers saying, you know, this is just a little bit too close. This is an accident waiting to happen. And sure enough, it did. I mean, he's one of South Africa. He's one of the world's great fast bowlers, but I think it was probably his other shoulder. It's not the bowling arm, so he's OK. But I'll tell you, it's a great
goodness for that.
Do you think maybe a spider cam tapped Harry Kane on his back when he was taking that penalty?
You know what? It's funny you should say that because I think that's exactly what happened. Just as he was about to score, something funny happened. I think there's our excuse. I think that's exactly what happened. Excellent work, Mr. Daubney. Excellent.
Paul Court. Paul Court.
Paul Court.
Always a pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Holding court.
Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Paul. We love you.
OK.
After the break, we'll be taking a last look at the papers. It's been great, hasn't it? So stay with us and we're back with you shortly.
Just in the way.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Good morning. The time has just gone 33 minutes past 9. Let's bring you up to date with the stories making the front pages of the papers today.
And the Eye covers the escalating train strikes, with thousands to be balloted again under a new tactic to increase the number of major walkouts across the whole network.
The Mail has an exclusive. Union barons have launched a loyalty card scheme for strikers. Designed, it claims, to artificially swell picket line numbers.
And a story we'll be covering in a moment. The Telegraph says the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst is today urged to tackle an allegedly toxic culture of sexual assault embedded within the institution.
The Express says thousands of vulnerable cancer patients are being stranded in isolation without support during the cost of living crisis.
And The Guardian says hundreds of voluntary organisations have been forced to shut or scale back operations because of government delays in replacing EU funding.
Well, let's delve into the papers in some more depth now, shall we? And joining us the last time this morning is political editor of Sunday People, Nigel Nelson, and former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall. A real-life married couple, everybody,
Yes.
watching and listening at home. Differing political opinions, which makes for great TV and a great paper review. So let's go again, shall we? Round 3. Claire, let's start with the Telegraph, shall we? And this quite shocking story about a toxic culture at Sandhurst.
It is, and I think we need to all remember that it was only in 1984 that Sandhurst admitted women. So prior to that, it had always been a male institution. The armed forces themselves had been very, very heavily male-dominated. And it's the one unfortunate fact that the MOD and all of the armed forces together haven't quite figured out how to deal with women and sexual assault and rape in parts of their institutions. And this is quite serious when you look at the numbers. And there is a lady here, Paula Edwards, Chief Executive of Salute Her UK, which is a charity looking after women in the armed forces, that said that 3,170 women on its database, more than half of those have been raped during their time in the armed forces. Now, there will be some who say, oh, well, it's just banter and it's not always sexual assault, it's just being one of the lads. But I think that that is half of the problem, that it isn't just banter. These are serious sexual assaults. Women want to be taken seriously in their career in the armed forces. They are very good at their careers, but they are treated almost as if they are trophies to some of the cadets when they're in training. And I think that's the problem. That attitude hasn't left certain parts of training. It needs to be dealt with. It needs to be dealt with quickly. Predatory behaviour shouldn't be allowed. These are professionals, whether they be a man or a woman. They are there to serve their country, and they need to be listened to. They need to be believed, and it needs to be dealt with.
I think we can all agree with that, can't we, Nigel? Another story, let's move on to yours now. This is on the front page of the Times. Another sex scandal, it seems. British MPs on a visit to a foreign state were met at their hotel by sex workers.
Yes, well, apparently this is not too unusual. The worry here was the MPs might be blackmailed because of it, but what these are all party parliamentary groups, which are only semi-official groups of MPs who get together with a particular interest. It can be anything from cycling to Botswana, whatever it might be. We've got 700 of these things, and the MPs go off travelling abroad. Now, Claire and myself have been working in the House of Commons for years, so we've heard many tales of bad behaviour on these trips. Most MPs behave themselves. They go there for a fact finder. They do the job. Some don't. Some get drunk, some use prostitutes. As a result, there's this warning that they could be blackmailed because of it. I mean, really, when you think about quite so many MPs' groups who obviously might well be paid for by somebody else for these trips, which actually sets up another problem. It looks like that some of them are going off on effectively 18 to 30 holidays, and they tend to be between their 50s and 60s.
Right. Are these taxpayer jollies? Are these paid for by the taxpayers and then they're going over there and getting up to this sort of nonsense?
No, they're not. No, I mean they're paid for by sponsors, which in itself can be a bit of a problem. We've had a bit of that with Qatar, for instance. There is an APPG on Qatar. So you also have then the select committees, the ones who look after legislation and shadow the departments. When they go on trips, they are paid by the taxpayer. These particular ones, no.
Well, I was an MEP for a while, and all I got was a box of chocolates on occasional trips. So there we go. I must be, leading a clean life. Let's move swiftly onwards. Claire, to the Telegraph. Now, this is an extraordinary story. We've been talking about this throughout the morning, about effective tax rates of at least 80% and as high as 96%. That could hit some middle-class families. What's going on here?
Well, I mean, this is the problem with our very complicated taxation system and where you have a crossover with the state benefit system. And what George Osborne did, if we all remember back in the day, to change the what was the old family allowance, which became child benefit, he decided that it wasn't to be a universal benefit anymore, and you would taper off as soon as you started earning over 50,000. Now, that rate has been frozen. And unfortunately, where people's wages have increased, whether they've got another job, it's dragging more and more people into the tax threshold where they will lose things like child benefit. And if they are in receipt of any universal credit, which some families in £50,000 will be if their childcare costs are extortionate, then you start to have this perfect storm of being taxed higher, as much as 96%, which is unbelievable in this day and age.
That's sort of 1970s style tax.
It certainly is. This is a majority of people's salaries now being lost, and it's just the government hasn't quite ironed out some of those problems. I think that if they don't do it, you are going to see more and more people, at least 90,000 families by about 2030, dragged into this, which is going to be some really difficult conditions for a lot of people who aren't earning huge amounts of money. And this has been a problem ever since it was introduced, this taper off of child benefit, where you have a single parent family earning just over the threshold, loses child benefit. Two families earning £49,000 each, two earners in one family, they still get to keep it. There has always been that kind of discrepancy. This is just making it worse, and it is a bit of a little perfect storm here for, and the Resolution Foundation are quite right to point this out, and it does need to be looked at.
And a perfect storm as well, if you think of the context of it all, with the cost of living crisis.
Yeah.
I mean, that's impacting middle-class families, where perhaps these are families that have never suffered before, working families struggling to put food on the table. And then you take into account these tax benefits being removed as well. I mean, it's going to impact people that have never had to worry about these things
there's
before.
a different study which is showing that because of the of people being dragged into higher tax rates, that even if you're on average earnings, say about 33,000, you stand to lose 8,000 more in tax over the next decade. And that's these weren't spelled out when Jeremy Hunt unveiled his budget, but that's the actual financial cost of what he was doing.
Do you sometimes think, Nigel and Claire, that we voted for Boris, we got Rishi through Liz, but we've ended up with taxation that sounds like Corbynism?
Well, to an extent it is. I mean, I have to say that I was amazed during the pandemic when Rishi Sunak, in fact, adopted John McDonnell's budget effectively, spending £400 billion during COVID. And certainly you're right. At the moment, what they're trying to do is just recoup money. They've got to get some money back because the finances are in such a terrible state. But yes, I mean, in a sense, that budget was something that Labour could have delivered.
And I wonder if man and wife, as it were, different sides of the political spectrum, But is part of the problem, Claire, is that all of the political parties just look and feel and sound the same?
I think that is one of the problems at the moment. You can't really get a sort of cigarette paper between all of them. There is enormous crossover. As Nigel said, the budget that we had during COVID was something Jeremy Corbyn would have been proud of, and we seem to be following the Labour Party on absolutely everything at the moment. And as a Conservative, that's really hard to
So how do we get out of this? How do the Tories put some sensible policies forward that does away with this nonsense? What about net zero?
I would like to see that go, and I think the majority of voters would also like to see that go. You need to get Brexit through and done properly. You start to reduce taxes. Those are the things that Conservatives want. Liz Truss, I think, went about it too quickly.
Yep.
I think some of her plans were very good, very interesting, very innovative, but I think it was just too much too soon. But we can't keep playing catch-up to the Labour Party. They put something out there and we take it as ours, because that isn't Conservative policy making. And Labour also need to actually come back with some kind of opposition, because we don't actually see what they stand for at the moment. There's a face being pulled at me down the other end of the table, but the policies aren't there.
It was your remark about Liz Truss that, I mean, Liz Truss's budget was completely and utterly bonkers. And the whole point of that was that when the markets reacted the way they did, this wasn't a political kind of gesture by them. All they care about is actually making profit. Making money, and they realised the budget was such a disaster that Britain wasn't worth investing in. And so, I mean, Liz Truss, I don't think one can suggest that any of it was on the right track.
But don't you think, looking back, though, the actual amount of money that Truss was pumping into the economy was about 4 billion quid? Now, people on the political left are after many, many multiples of that to pay nurses and to pay... So
where's it coming from?
Yeah, where's that money coming? If we couldn't find £4 billion for those tax cuts, where the heck are we going to find all these untold billions to pay nurses and the RMT?
But that was the whole point of Liz Truss's budget, that when she was trying to cut taxes at a time when taxes really shouldn't be cut, I mean, I don't even think the Labour Party certainly the Labour Party wouldn't have done that. But the real problem was it was never costage. I mean, that fundamental mistake of not getting the Office of Budget Responsibility report in, which would have told her whether or not this was a goer. I suspect the reason it didn't come through is because it wasn't a goer, and the markets then reacted the way they did.
But I think that does highlight the problem, though, is that where does the opposition go? If they want to fund the NHS to the tune of God knows how many millions more, and railway workers and paramedics and where does that money come from? Because I haven't seen anything laid out from the Labour Party that would suggest they have a plan for making that happen, other than increasing taxes than they are already.
Your lot nicked the windfall tax that Labour put forward. When it comes to the health service, they're talking about getting rid of non-dom status. That would raise about £1.6 billion for the health service. So there are other things out there that you could actually get the money from.
Is this what the dinner table is like?
Yeah, all the time.
Actually, it brings us quite neatly onto the next story.
Yes, it does.
In the eye here, it's one of yours, Nigel. Make a plan for breakups before buying a house together, says Vicky Spratt. This seems a bit depressing. Plan for your demise before you even get going.
Yeah. It's actually quite good advice, really. Although not in our case. I mean, I'd never be able to work the TV remote, find my socks, and where I would get my political stories from without Claire, I've no idea. But what this actually is, it's more about cohabitation. And I think this is the next big thing that legislation has to tackle, to actually give cohabiting couples proper rights. One of the suggestions here in the eye is that you actually have a contract drawn up when you first get together, which doesn't sound terribly romantic. But the problem is there's no such thing as common law marriage, and people think that there is. There's nothing in law about that. And as a result, if you break up and you're just living with somebody, you have no rights whatsoever. So whoever owns the house, they will take the whole lot. And one of the things that really that politicians now need to do is come out with proper laws to cover cohabitation, so people will have some rights.
Well, Ellie, you're a bit younger than the rest of us on this panel, if you don't mind me saying so. I don't want to misage you. But if a fella came into your life, or you have one in your life, and he said, right, we're going to get together, but here's a prenup. sign this. How would that make you feel?
Well, it's not very romantic, is it? And
No, it's not.
I agree
No.
with you, Nigel. But you know what? A lot of my friends are having this conversation with their other halves now because you cannot afford to buy by yourself. You just can't.
Yeah.
So you do need to buy with that second person to enable to get a mortgage to afford anything. That's just the reality of it. So it's how you tackle that. And people are coming in on different salaries and people are putting down a lot more than perhaps the other. It is messy. It's really, really difficult. I actually think Vicky Spratt has got a plan here in this article, basically saying you need to just work it out, really, until it is enshrined in law, what you do as a couple. And I think it just ultimately comes down to what you think is best. I mean,
But it is like a prenup,
yeah, it is like a prenup, but
Yeah.
it's like in sometimes the early stages of dating. I mean, but that's the reality because people can't afford to buy by
It
themselves.
is, and it's a very harsh reality, but it actually just then takes all of that problem away should you break up, which those of us that have been through a divorce at this table know how painful that is. But I think if you have this contract drawn up, there are no disagreements. If you split, you've got something written that states that you're having, you know, it's split 60-40, 30-70, whatever the split is, and whoever's taking the cat or the dog or the goldfish, it's there and everybody knows where they stand. So it takes that horrible emotional pull out of it, which when you go through a divorce, the financial settlement is always very, very painful. So I think anything that can minimise that has got to be a good thing.
Well, hopefully, Claire, Nigel, thank you for joining us this morning together as good. There won't be another divorce amongst you
On the
pair.
cards, no.
I'm delighted.
Not a chance.
I'm delighted that we got you in as a couple. Broken your duck.
Thank you.
And hopefully you'll be a double out for many, many
Hope
more
so.
periods.
Hope so. No, good fun, thank you.
It's been great fun. Thanks for coming in today.
Now it's just gone 49 minutes past 9. Let's bring you up to date with the latest news headlines.
And West Midlands Police have named a 23-year-old man killed at a nightclub in Birmingham on Boxing Day as Cody Fisher. Officers were called to the Crane nightclub after reports a man had been stabbed to death on the dance floor. Hundreds of people were at the club at the time and witnesses are being urged to come forward. It's a really upsetting story, that one.
It really is. The city of Buffalo in New York State has started the cleanup after a severe blizzard hit, causing 28 fatalities in that area alone, with many people freezing to death in their cars. Authorities have been digging out from under 4 feet of snow after a record amount of snowfall. Across the US, at least 60 people have died because of the storm.
And some families could experience a tax rate of at least 80% in 2023, as we just heard in the paper review, due to a collision between two welfare systems. That's according to the Resolution Foundation. Around 50,000 families will see child benefits withdrawn at the same time as universal credit.
Now, it was a day that shook the nation. Despite Her Majesty the Queen's advanced years, her passing on the 8th of September 2022 still caused shock and a huge sense of loss across the nation.
Our royal reporter Cameron Walker looks back on that day and the events that followed.
The news that everyone was dreading happened. Buckingham Palace has announced that the Queen has died peacefully at Balmoral.
A day that is now etched in history.
Queen Elizabeth II was the rock on which modern Britain was built. Our country has grown and flourished under her reign. Britain is the great country it is today because of her.
Thousands gathered at royal residences to lay flowers and Paddington bears. A nod to Her late Majesty's surprise sketch at her Platinum Jubilee. Immediately, Charles ascended the throne and was formally proclaimed king at the Accession Council in St James's Palace. Politicians, past and present, united in grief despite their party differences.
He'd lost his mother on the Thursday. Here he was on the Saturday morning, standing in front of all of his Privy Councillors. They're his Privy Councillors now.
The king paid tributes to his beloved mother and renewed her pledge of lifelong service.
Hi everyone, thank you so much.
An olive branch from Prince William to his brother Prince Harry, when the siblings reunited to greet the public with their wives and view flowers outside Windsor. Any reconciling was short-lived. The Queen's coffin, accompanied by her daughter Princess Anne, was driven to St Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh to lie at rest. an opportunity for the people of Scotland to pay their last respects to the Queen of the United Kingdom. An RAF C-17 flew Her late Majesty back to London. The state hearse, specially designed for the public to see inside, drove down crowd-lined streets before one final night in Buckingham Palace. A well-rehearsed ceremonial procession brought the Queen to Westminster Hall so the public could pay their last respects as Her late Majesty lay in state.
People would queue for hours on end. They'd finally get in, and it would be 5 seconds, 6 seconds, and it just happened so beautifully and so peacefully.
The state gun carriage of the Royal Navy, pulled by 142 Royal Naval ratings, took Queen Elizabeth II's coffin to Westminster Abbey for the state funeral. At the King's request, the wreath on top of the coffin contained flowers from the gardens of Buckingham Palace, Clarence House and Highgrove. The royal family's dignity and stoicism shone through in the face of unimaginable grief. Princess Charlotte's choice of brooch, in the shape of a horseshoe, was gifted by her great-grandmother, the Queen. She, alongside her future king brother George, processed behind the coffin with their parents, the Prince and Princess of Wales. The state hearse to Windsor Castle for the committal service. More than 800 people, including the Queen's personal staff, filled St George's Chapel, in stark contrast to Prince Philip's funeral, where just 30 people could attend because of COVID restrictions. The imperial state crown, the orb and the sceptre were removed from the coffin and placed on the high altar. The King then placed the Queen's camp colour of the Grenadier Guards on the coffin. The wand broken, creating the symmetry with the 3 instruments of state being removed, ready to be passed on to their successor. The Queen was buried with her late husband, Prince Philip, in a private service in the King George VI Memorial Chapel. Back together for eternity. Cameron Walker, GB News.
And Cameron Walker is here with us in the studio. And Cameron, it is so emotional to look at those pictures of Her Majesty because despite her being 96 years old when she passed, it was the news that everyone dreaded, but no one expected it. Shocked us all, didn't it?
It certainly did. I think it's because we saw her literally 2 days before bowing out Liz Truss as Prime Minister and then, Boris Johnson as Prime Minister and then marching in Liz Truss as Prime Minister. So because we saw those photographs, yes, she looked frail, but she was clearly still with it. She was smiling, she looked happy. She missed the Privy Council meeting the day after, but that wasn't unusual because we knew that she was frail and she had mobility problems, which the palace had described in the past. But also, her mother lived till she was 101, so I think in the back of everyone's mind, we were thinking she's got a few years left, but then clearly on the Thursday, we found out it was not the case.
And I think it's understandable you got your prime ministers mixed up. We have, of course, had 3 this year.
Of course.
You know, we wanted 3 wise men. We got that lot. I want to talk to you, if I can. I want to be slightly grinchy about the King's speech because I watched it with all the family, expecting big things. Difficult act to follow, but I do think it felt like, you know, a kind of public sector thank you at a time when a lot of them were on strike, and scant thanks for the average hard-working Brit who's done their very level best to keep this country ticking over. It felt to me a little bit like a party political broadcast of the Labour Party.
It was a very interesting speech. It was clearly done in King Charles's way, his first speech as monarch. It's understood he did write it pretty much himself, but you're right, there was a reference to public sector workers and the service they provide this country. Clearly, he wasn't overly political. He did not mention the strikes. He didn't mention that. But you're right, there wasn't any mention of perhaps private sector workers. He paid tribute to emergency services, armed forces. He also spoke of the cost of living crisis and helping communities around you, which perhaps you could say does include private sector workers as well. It's a very fine line with the monarch not being too overly political, and I think Charles is very much aware of that, and, you know, going forward, he very much...
OK, Cameron, we're going to have to stop you there. Maybe it's just me being the Grinch, and sorry to bring the mood down, but thanks for all your work this year. It's been fantastic.
Yes, thank you, Cameron. Well, we're back with you tomorrow morning. Thanks for your company today. Coming up next, it's Bev Turner Today. The UK is looking wet and windy for some, with the driest weather in the north. Heavy rain will affect southwest England through this morning, bringing a risk of flooding and potential travel disruption. A mild but windy start to the day with coastal gales likely. Rain will affect London and southeast England this morning. It'll be mostly light, but there will be some heavy bursts too, becoming increasingly windy. It'll be a wet and blustery start for southern Wales with spells of heavy rain that could cause delays to transport.